So look, if you are still cold calling like it is 1990, your buyers, well, they aren't just ignoring you anymore. They are actively avoiding you.
Oh, totally. Actively avoiding is the perfect way to put it.
Right. I mean, think about the infrastructure of the internet as this massive highway system. Back in the day, the traditional salesperson was essentially like a toll booth attendant on that information highway.
I like that analogy.
Yeah, because if a buyer wanted to know anything, pricing models, implementation timelines, or just what the competitive landscape looked like, they had absolutely no choice but to pull over, roll down their window, and pay the toll.
Right. And that toll was surrendering their time to listen to your pitch.
Exactly. But today, I mean, the infrastructure has completely changed. Every single buyer out there has an easy pass.
Yep. They are just flying by.
Flying by at 80 miles an hour, completely bypassing your toll booth, and their windows are rolled up tight. So the ultimate question we are tackling today in this deep dive is this. How do you actually sell your product or service in a world that's equipped with, advanced spam filters, ad blockers, and Google?
A world where the buyer holds absolute power.
Exactly.
So that tension is the central focus of our deep dive today. We are looking at a foundational set of principles from the source material, specifically focusing on the introduction in Chapter 1. We're going to explain how the internet fundamentally transferred power from the seller to the buyer.
Which created what we call the empowered buyer, right?
Exactly, the empowered buyer. And we'll explore the psychological traps that keep modern sales teams locked into these, well, failing strategies.
That's a massive issue.
It really is. We're going to analyze a real-world catastrophic failure of traditional marketing and then unpack the mechanics of inbound selling.
Okay, wait, what is inbound selling for those who might not know?
All right, so inbound selling is a context-driven approach. It's designed to attract buyers rather than interrupt them. The whole mission here is to understand why abandoning outdated interruptive tactics is basically the only mathematically and economically viable path forward for anyone building a business today.
So to understand the sheer magnitude of this power transfer, I feel like we have to look at the mechanics of the buyer-seller dynamic before this shift even occurred.
Yeah, we have to go back in time a bit.
Because it is tempting to think of the evolution of sales as the slow, gradual refinement of techniques. But the reality presented in our sources describes a sudden and honestly violent paradigm shift.
It was a total shock to the system.
Right. We are looking at an era where information asymmetry was the foundational bedrock of the sales profession.
Information asymmetry, that is the perfect economic term for it. I mean, in 1990, the seller held a virtual monopoly on product knowledge.
They held all the cards.
All of them. A prospective buyer could not just, open a browser, load up a dozen competitor websites, and do a side-by-side feature comparison. That just wasn't a thing.
No, not at all.
They couldn't access third-party review sites like G2 Crowd or TrustRadius to read unvarnished reviews from current users.
Right, because those didn't exist.
Exactly. And they couldn't seamlessly audit a company's executive team on LinkedIn to gauge their credibility. So the only way to acquire the data necessary to make a purchasing decision was to interact directly with the vendor's representative.
Which gave the salesperson incredible power.
Yes. The salesperson possessed the data, and therefore they possessed the leverage.
And the physical manifestation of that leverage was, well, it was intense. I mean, we have accounts from the CDO, Brian Halligan, describing the reality of enterprise sales in that era.
Oh, the hardware stories.
The hardware stories are insane. A software rep would literally board a flight checking a 100-pound Unix workstation plus a massive CRT monitor as luggage.
Wait, really? 100 pounds of gear just for a meeting?
Yes. Just to secure a preliminary meeting. They were hauling server equipment through airports, sleeping in unfamiliar cities, and all of this for a scheduled appointment that carried a 30% probability of being canceled at the last minute.
That sounds miserable, honestly.
It was. The sheer friction involved in just getting the basic information to the buyer was astronomical.
And, the reason that high-friction model survived was simply that buyers tolerated it out of pure necessity.
Because they had no other option.
Exactly. They took the meetings and accepted the disruption to their schedules because there was no alternative mechanism for discovering marketplace innovations.
Until technology stepped in.
Right. Technology intervened in two distinct phases. The first phase gave buyers access to the information they previously lacked. Think Google, websites, all that.
Right, the democratization of information.
But the second phase, which is far more disruptive to the traditional sales model, provided buyers with sophisticated defense mechanisms. Technology basically armed consumers with shields.
shields. I love that word for it. And those defense mechanisms fundamentally altered consumer behavior.
Oh, entirely.
Because if you look at the timeline of technological adoption, it shows a very clear pattern of consumers actively seeking out ways to block unsolicited messaging.
Yeah, people were desperate for it.
I mean, people adopted digital video recorders like TiVo specifically to bypass television advertising.
Right. Skipping the commercials became the norm.
And then they migrated to subscription satellite radio to escape audio commercials.
Mm-hmm.
Caller ID transitioned from this like premium novelty to a standard feature, which allowed individuals to screen and reject unknown numbers systematically.
Which was a game changer for the home phone.
Huge game changer. And then regulatory framework like the National Do Not Call Registry were established because public frustration with telemarketing just reached a boiling point.
People were just fed up.
Totally fed up. The market demanded tools to insulate themselves from interruption, and the tech industry just supplied them en masse.
And this mass adoption of defensive technology completely fractured the traditional timeline of a sale. The empirical data from the sources on this is really striking.
What does the data show?
Well, research from groups like CEB indicates that over 60% of the B2B purchasing decision is now finalized before a buyer ever initiates contact with a sales representative.
Wow. 60%.
At least. And furthermore, Forrester analysts predicted that we would soon reach a threshold where up to 80% of the entire buying life cycle, from problem identification to vendor selection, occurs entirely within what we call the dark funnel.
The dark funnel, that sounds ominous.
It's just a term for the research phase we can't see. Buyers are reading forums, they're asking peers in private digital communities, and they're consuming content without ever triggering a vendor's radar.
Okay, wait, let me unpack this and challenge the logical conclusion of that data.
Go for it.
If a buyer is navigating 60 to 80% of the decision-making matrix entirely independently, utilizing peer networks and self-serve research, the traditional value proposition of a salesperson just vanishes.
It certainly seems that way.
Right, because if I can diagnose my own problem, compare all the solutions myself, and read the implementation pitfalls from actual users online, I don't need a human being to broker the transaction. Doesn't this data suggest that the role of the sales rep is just dead?
You would think so, but no. Halligan actually addresses this perfectly. If we follow that logic, the profession seems doomed, but the sources point to an evolution of the role, rather than its extinction.
Okay, so how does the role evolve?
Well, the buyer has conquered the information gathering phase, right? But information abundance often creates a secondary problem, which is analysis paralysis.
Ah, too much data.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because buyers are inundated with data, they frequently struggle to synthesize it into a coherent strategy for their specific, unique business context.
So they need help making sense of it all.
Yes. They don't need a representative at the beginning of the journey to read a feature list to them. They need a consultant at the end of the journey to mitigate risk.
That makes a lot of sense.
They need an expert who can look at their unique infrastructure, process the research the buyer has already done, and provide a tailored framework for implementation. The role transitions from a provider of raw data to a provider of contextual synthesis.
Okay, so that reframes the interaction entirely. The buyer doesn't need someone to hand them a map. They need a guide to tell them which specific path avoids the hazards unique to their own vehicle.
That's a great way to put it.
But, I mean, if the economic reality of the buyer has shifted so drastically towards self-education, why is the modern sales landscape still totally saturated with cold calls and unsolicited mass emails?
Because behavior is so hard to change.
Right. There seems to be a massive lag between how buyers buy and how sellers sell.
The lag is rooted in profound cognitive dissonance across the entire sales industry. Human behavior, especially within these rigid corporate structures, is deeply resistant to change.
Especially when money is involved.
Exactly. You have entire management hierarchies, VPs of sales, directors, frontline managers, who built their careers, and frankly their personal wealth, over the last 20 years using a high-volume, interruptive, outbound model.
So they are incredibly biased toward it.
Right. To abandon that model requires them to admit that the skills which made them successful are now liabilities. This psychological entrenchment creates a fascinating hypocrisy.
A hypocrisy? How so?
It's a disconnect between how sales professionals behave as consumers in their own lives versus how they behave as practitioners at work.
Oh, the hypocrisy is perhaps the most revealing aspect of this entire dynamic. We see this acute behavioral disconnect every single day.
We really do.
Imagine a sales executive sitting in their office trying to focus on a quarterly report, Their mobile phone rings with an unrecognized
And
number.
what do they do?
They reject the call immediately. They view it as an unwarranted intrusion. Then they open their inbox, spot a generic promotional email from a vendor they've never engaged with, and instantly route it to the spam folder. They violently protect their own attention from interruption.
Yet, that very same executive will turn around to their team, hand them a legally purchased but entirely cold list of 10,000 email addresses, and mandate that they execute a mass outreach campaign.
It is so wild when you think about it.
It is. They categorize the unsolicited messages landing in their own inbox as spam, but they categorize the identical activity generated by their team as email marketing.
The exact same activity.
Yes. They demand their reps make 50 unprompted phone calls a day, interrupting other professionals' workflows, and they dignify the intrusion by calling it prospecting.
You know, it's a phenomenon we can honestly call artisanal spam syndrome.
Artisanal spam, I love that.
Yeah, because the sender operates under the delusion that their specific mass communication is somehow exempt from the rules of human annoyance. They spend hours wordsmithing a clever subject line or, tweaking a template.
Right, and because they put effort in, they think it's valuable.
Exactly. Because they invested effort into its creation, they assume the recipient will assign value to it. But from the recipient's perspective, the craftsmanship of the interruption is totally irrelevant.
Spam is spam.
Spam is spam. If the message lacks context, relevance, and prior consent, it is classified as spam the millisecond it registers on the screen.
And the quantitative results of this artisanal spam are mathematically disastrous. The data cited from Forbes and the research highlights the complete futility of this approach.
Let's hear the numbers.
Over 90% of CEOs report that they absolutely never respond to cold emails or cold phone calls. Never.
90%. That is a massive fall.
And when we analyze the conversion rates of the microscopic fraction of outreach that actually does generate a response, only roughly 2% of that activity translates into an actual scheduled meeting.
2%.
Yeah. From an operational standpoint, burning through thousands of potential accounts to yield a 2% conversion rate is an incredibly inefficient way to allocate resources.
Okay, so let's examine the mechanics of what actually breaks through that defense mechanism, because obviously some people do get meetings.
Right.
We have an account in the sources from Halligan himself, who receives an average of 15 cold pitches daily.
Just entirely cold.
Entirely cold. These messages are entirely generic, offering absolutely no acknowledgement of his recent publications, company milestones, or specific industry challenges. And, surprise, surprise, they yield a 0% response rate.
Off they do.
But he noted that a highly tailored message, one that demonstrated deep preliminary research and offered a specific contextual insight, would immediately capture his attention.
The distinction there is all about intent and posture. The generic messages position the sender as someone attempting to extract value, right?
Right, they want his budget or his time.
Exactly. But the highly tailored, researched message positions the sender as someone offering value. When a professional receives outreach that genuinely helps them solve an immediate problem, they do not categorize the sender as a salesperson.
What do they categorize them as?
A helper, a highly competent consultant.
But, okay, practically speaking, for the listener who is out there trying to build a pipeline today, scaling highly customized, deeply researched outreach is incredibly difficult.
It is very time-consuming.
Very. If a company relies on a volume-based outbound strategy to hit their revenue targets, pivoting to a low-volume, high-research model feels like stalling the engine.
It feels risky.
Yeah, if I am managing a startup with a burn rate that requires closing 5 deals this month, I simply don't have time to write bespoke consultative essays to 100 prospects. The math of survival often pushes companies back toward the comfort of volume, even if the conversion rate is terrible.
I hear that pushback a lot, but that perceived safety of volume is an illusion. And relying on it when the business is on the line often leads to catastrophic frontline failure.
A catastrophic failure? Like what happened to Gifson time?
Exactly. The source material provides a highly detailed post-mortem of this startup, Gifson Time, written by the author, Brian Signorelli, to illustrate this exact trap.
Okay, walk us through what happened there.
Well, Brian was hired to run sales and marketing. He possessed a budget, but admittedly lacked modern sales experience.
So he just did what everyone else was doing.
Right. Consequently, he deployed the capital based on traditional, intuitive business logic, which was, if you need customers, you buy attention.
And they went all in. They executed a textbook outbound blitz.
They really did.
They allocated $7,000 a month to a social media agency, basically simply to broadcast their brand name into the void. They purchased extensive databases of email addresses to run mass blast campaigns.
Typical playbook.
Yeah, and they bought advertising space in industry publications. They treated the market like a pure numbers game, assuming that sheer volume of exposure would inevitably yield a proportionate volume of revenue.
But the climax of this flawed strategy, the part that really hurts to read, was their participation in a major industry trade show.
Oh, the trade show trap?
Yes. Trade shows are basically the ultimate manifestation of outbound, interruptive marketing disguised as networking, and Gifts and Time invested heavily.
Ow, heavily.
They designed and built a custom physical booth. They handled the complex logistics of shipping a 400-pound box of collateral across the country to Orlando.
Wait, really? A 400-pound box?
Yeah. They spent massive amounts of capital covering travel, lodging, floor space, and sponsorships, all to physically insert themselves into a concentrated population of their supposed ideal buyers.
Which in their case were legal marketing and human resources professionals.
Exactly.
So let's dissect the psychology of that trade show environment, because it perfectly explains why this strategy failed so spectacularly.
It's a fascinating psychological trap.
It really is. So picture this. After enduring 3 grueling days of standing on a concrete exhibition floor, aggressively initiating conversations with literally every passing attendee, the team retreated to their hotel room.
Exhausted, I'm sure.
Totally exhausted, but euphoric. They were sitting there with drinks, staring at a collection of 300 physical business cards.
300 cards.
Right. And Brian literally looked at those cards and thought to himself, this is what $1 million looks like. They possessed the physical artifacts of engagement, which created this incredibly powerful illusion of momentum.
But the underlying economic reality of those 300 cards was effectively zero.
Zero value.
Zero. The text reveals 3 structural, harsh realities about trade shows as a primary lead generation mechanism.
Okay, what is the first one?
First, the psychological state of the attendee is completely misaligned with the intent to purchase. For many professionals, a trade show is basically a sanctioned vacation from their daily responsibilities.
That is so true. They're just there to collect free pens and drink at the mixer.
Exactly. They are there to socialize, maybe attend a few seminars, and collect novelty promotional items. They are not in the cognitive state required to evaluate complex vendor contracts.
Right. Okay, what is the second flaw?
The second structural flaw is the seniority of the attendees. While you might capture the attention of a mid-level manager who is fascinated by your software demo, that individual rarely wields the budgetary authority required to actually sign a contract.
Because the C-suite executives, the actual decision makers, are generally not wandering the exhibition floor scanning their badges at every random booth.
Precisely. You are pitching to influencers, not buyers.
Okay, and the third flaw?
The third flaw is a fundamental misunderstanding of the event's purpose. Trade shows excel at broad brand awareness. If your objective is simply to ensure the market knows your logo exists, a booth can facilitate that.
But not for lead generation.
Right. If your objective is to generate highly qualified, high-intent leads who are ready to enter a sales cycle, a trade show is an incredibly inefficient mechanism. You are interrupting people who just happen to be walking by.
Collecting hundreds of business cards under those conditions is basically the equivalent of amassing a fortune in Monopoly money.
Monopoly money, yes.
I mean, sitting in the hotel room counting the brightly colored paper, you feel like a real estate tycoon. The psychological reward system in your brain is firing off because you performed an action and received a token.
But it's totally fake.
Right. The moment you attempt to exchange those tokens for actual economic value in the real world, the illusion shatters. The pipeline isn't real because the intent wasn't real.
And the fallout for Gifts and Time was severe. I mean, they were burning through their cash runway at an unsustainable velocity without generating the corresponding revenue.
They were bleeding dry.
Yeah, traditional interruption marketing was killing them. They reached a critical threshold where their operational capital dwindled to between $10,000 and $20,000.
Oh, wow. That is terrifying for a startup.
They were facing imminent closure. But this intense financial pressure is actually what forced them to abandon the outbound philosophy entirely, and it led to their discovery of the inbound methodology.
Yeah, and the turning point wasn't a strategic retreat to a whiteboard, which I find interesting. It was a firsthand experience with a radically different sales posture.
Right, the HubSpot meeting. Exactly.
Brian engaged with 2 sales reps from HubSpot, John Marcus and Mike Redboard. If we break down the architecture of that specific interaction, we see exactly why inbound selling requires a complete rewiring of the sales rep's brain.
It's a totally different mindset.
Totally.
You're
Because
saying.
the traditional outbound instinct, when you finally get a prospect on the phone, is to immediately assert dominance and value.
Oh, yeah. Let me tell you about our features.
Right. A standard rep might open with an arrogant question like, "What do you know about us?" Or just immediately launch into a rehearsed pitch.
But the HubSpot reps did the exact opposite.
What did they do?
They adopted the posture of diagnosticians. They did not utter a single sentence about their software's capabilities, their pricing structure, or their feature set.
Not a single sentence.
Nope. Instead, they asked aggressive, structural questions about Gifts and Time's business model. They asked how the company generated revenue, what specific marketing strategies they were currently deploying, and critically, why the leadership believed those strategies were failing.
So they centered the entire dialogue exclusively on the prospect's operational pain.
Exactly. And by maintaining that diagnostic posture, the reps uncovered a massive structural vulnerability that the Gifts and Time team had entirely overlooked.
What was the vulnerability?
Despite spending massive amounts of capital driving traffic to their website through those agencies and trade shows, their website possessed zero conversion architecture.
Meaning it was just a dead end.
It was essentially a static, digital brochure. A prospect could read about the company, but there was no mechanism, no lead magnet, no form, no offer to capture their contact information and actually initiate a relationship.
So they were pouring water into a bucket with a giant hole in the bottom.
Exactly. Recognizing this flaw, Gifts and Time utilized their remaining capital to execute their very first true inbound campaign.
And the mechanics of this campaign represent a total inversion of their previous strategy.
Complete 180.
Instead of purchasing an email list to extract attention from strangers, they invested in creating an asset of high intrinsic value. They authored a comprehensive educational document titled The Ultimate Guide to Client Gift Giving.
They leveraged their domain expertise to solve a specific problem for their target demographic.
Right. And let's look at the economics of this asset creation, because it's important. Writing a comprehensive guide requires time, subject matter expertise, and design resources.
It's not a quick fix.
No, it is an investment with a delayed return, whereas buying a list provides immediate, albeit extremely low-quality data.
But the long-term mechanics of the inbound asset are vastly superior.
Oh, without a doubt. They placed this guide behind a conversion form on a dedicated landing page. The transaction was incredibly simple. We will provide you with this highly valuable operational knowledge, and in exchange, you'll provide us with your contact information.
And the velocity of the result totally validated the model.
What happened?
On the very first day the campaign launched, they captured over 40 new leads.
40 leads on day one.
Day one. And these were not random individuals collected from a purchase database or scanned badges from a trade show floor. These were 40 professionals who voluntarily identified themselves as having a specific problem related to client gift giving.
And they actively requested intervention from Gifts and Time. The intent was baked into the conversion.
Which establishes the fundamental golden rule of the inbound methodology. You must give before you get.
Give before you get.
Yes, you must deposit value into the ecosystem, whether through deep industry research, educational frameworks, or actionable templates, to earn a buyer's trust and their contact information.
You transform the mechanics of your business from an aggressive outbound steer into a passive, high-intent magnet.
Beautifully said. However, capturing a high-intent lead creates a new point of failure for traditional sales teams.
Wait, how is capturing a good lead a point of failure?
Because the reflex of a representative who's been starved for pipeline is to treat an inbound lead exactly like a cold outbound connection.
Ah, I see.
They see the notification that a prospect downloaded the ebook, they immediately dial the number, and the second the prospect answers, the rep launches into a hard pitch for the software.
Which instantly destroys the trust the educational asset just created.
Instantly.
Okay, let me play devil's advocate on this specific point, though.
Sure.
If a prospect has taken the time to visit my website, read my landing page, type in their corporate email address, and download my specific guide on, say, optimizing warehouse logistics, they clearly have a problem with their logistics. So why is it a mistake to immediately pitch them my logistics software? They signaled intent, and my job is to close revenue. Why shouldn't I capitalize on that momentum instantly?
I get that instinct, absolutely.
Yeah.
But it's a mistake because downloading a guide signals curiosity or a preliminary diagnostic phase, not necessarily a readiness to purchase enterprise software right that second.
Okay, that's fair.
If you immediately transition into a high-pressure pitch, you violate the established dynamic. They engaged with you as an educator. You responded as a predator.
Oh, wow. Educator versus predator. That's a stark contrast.
The correct inbound sales posture requires you to maintain the role of the consultant. You must reference the specific asset they interacted with, ask what internal operational challenge prompted them to seek out that information, and really explore their broader business context.
So you don't pitch, you diagnose.
Exactly. You must diagnose the severity of the problem before prescribing your solution. If you prescribe without diagnosing, it is malpractice.
That makes the transition to inbound selling not just a marketing challenge, but a massive behavioral management challenge. You have to literally retrain aggressive closer mentalities to operate with patience and empathy.
Which is not easy.
No, it isn't. But let's extrapolate this methodology forward, because the inbound playbook of creating ebooks and optimizing landing pages is highly effective right now, but technology continues to accelerate.
It never stops.
So how does the concept of the empowered buyer evolve over the next 5 to 10 years? We need to look at the future trajectory of the purchasing environment as Halligan predicts it.
The fundamental trajectory is the systematic eradication of friction in the buying process.
Eradication of friction. What does that look like?
Historically, the process involves significant waiting periods. A buyer submitted a form and waited 24 to 48 hours for a representative to contact them.
Right, the classic "we'll get back to you" page.
Exactly. But that latency is becoming unacceptable. The environment is shifting toward instant booking architectures, where a buyer can view a representative's live calendar and schedule a consultation directly.
So it bypasses the asynchronous email negotiation entirely.
Exactly. Furthermore, we are seeing the rise of instant communication channels, where high-intent website visitors can engage in real-time chat with a human representative the exact moment they signal a buying intent.
The concept of waiting to speak to a salesperson is being completely flipped on its head.
Totally flipped. And this technological shift is compounding with a massive demographic shift.
Generation Z.
Yes, the B2B purchasing committees are rapidly populating with Generation Z professionals. And the communication infrastructure this demographic relies on is entirely different from the previous generation.
How so?
Well, as Halligan points out, they view asynchronous formal email communication as inherently sluggish and often irrelevant. They don't use it the way older generations do.
And let me guess, they don't like talking on the phone either.
Exactly. Utilizing a synchronous voice call to interact with an unknown vendor is entirely outside their behavioral norms. They are structurally immune to traditional outreach.
So if a company's revenue engine is entirely dependent on phone dials and mass email blasts, their business model possesses a rapidly approaching expiration date.
It's a ticking clock. To survive, organizations must adapt their sales motions to exist natively within the environments these new buyers actually occupy.
Which means developing strategies for social selling, mastering communication within secure messaging apps, and understanding how to provide value in micro-interactions rather than, lengthy, formal presentations.
Absolutely.
Let's consider the mechanics of reaching a demographic that has completely abandoned your primary communication channel. I mean, attempting to reach Gen Z with an email marketing blast is like trying to send a fax to a millennial.
That's hilarious and totally accurate.
It isn't just that they don't want to read it. The actual infrastructure required to even care about it doesn't exist in their daily lives. If your sales strategy doesn't align with their native communication ecosystem, you functionally do not exist in their marketplace.
You're just a ghost.
Yeah.
And that alignment will become increasingly reliant on advanced technologies in the future, specifically artificial intelligence and augmented reality.
Okay, let's talk about the sci-fi stuff. How does AR factor into this?
The projections suggest a bifurcation of these tools. Augmented reality will likely empower the buyer, sitting firmly on their side of the table.
How would they use it?
A buyer will use AR to virtually deploy a piece of industrial machinery onto their factory floor, testing physical constraints and spatial requirements without ever needing a sales engineer to conduct an on-site demonstration.
Wow. So that further extends the self-service portion of the buying journey even more.
Exactly. The buyer does even more work without you.
Meanwhile, the seller will become heavily reliant on artificial intelligence.
Because AI solves a massive mathematical problem.
Right. Earlier, we discussed the impossibility of scaling highly personalized, deeply researched outreach manually. You just don't have the time.
But AI does. Advanced algorithms will analyze a prospect's digital footprint, their corporate announcements, their subtle social media interactions, their shifting organizational charts.
And automatically generate hyper-contextual messaging at the exact moment the prospect exhibits buying signals. The AI will literally monitor the dark funnel for you.
Yes, but this introduces a critical paradox.
What's the paradox?
Think about it. If AI allows every single sales organization to perfectly automate hyper-personalized contextual outreach, then personalization ceases to be a competitive advantage.
Oh, I see. It just becomes a baseline commodity.
Exactly. The buyer's inbox will be flooded with flawlessly written, contextually accurate messages generated by bots.
So what does the buyer do?
Consequently, buyers will deploy their own AI to filter and manage this influx.
Oh, wow. So it becomes an algorithmic arms race. The seller's AI is attempting to penetrate the inbox, and the buyer's AI is aggressively guarding it.
It's exactly bot pitching to bot.
If the technology perfectly cancels itself out, what remains? I mean, if an AI can write a better pitch than a human, and an AI can block that pitch instantly, the only remaining differentiator is profound, unautomatable human trust.
That is exactly right.
The future doesn't belong to the salesperson who can use technology to mimic empathy at scale. The future belongs to the professional who can leverage technology to eliminate administrative friction, freeing them up to engage in genuine, complex problem-solving that an algorithm just cannot replicate.
That is the ultimate synthesis of this entire discussion.
Huh.
The era where a salesperson derived their value from being the exclusive gatekeeper of product information is permanently closed.
It's over.
The economic and informational power has shifted irreversibly to the buyer. Therefore, a successful commercial strategy can no longer rely on volume-based interruption.
No more toll booths.
Exactly. The metrics of success have changed from who can dial the most numbers to who can provide the most precise, contextual, and empathetic guidance to a buyer who has already traversed the majority of the purchasing journey entirely alone.
The transformation from an interrupter to a trusted advisor is basically no longer a best practice. It is a mandate for survival.
Absolutely.
Well, we have dissected the fundamental mechanics of this power shift, from the agonizing friction of the historical 1990s sales motion to the psychological traps that perpetuate failing outbound strategies today.
And the economic necessity of adopting a high-intent, value-first inbound posture.
Right. We see clearly why the mechanics of selling must mirror the psychology of buying. But as we conclude, I want you to consider the operational reality you face tomorrow morning.
It's a big question.
It is. If you accept that buying lists and cold calling is mathematically broken and you commit to an inbound philosophy, a massive structural question remains. How do you actually identify the precise organizations and individuals who are actively experiencing the pain your product solves before they ever fill out a form on your website?
How do you map the unseen intent in your market without resorting to those sketchy email lists?
Exactly. That is the strategic puzzle for you to solve as you audit your own revenue engine. Until next time. Over 60% of a buyer's decision-making process is completely finished before they even speak to a sales rep.
Yeah, that is a massive number.
Right. And here's where it gets really interesting. If you think you can just force your way in with a cold call, well, over 90% of CEOs say they never respond to cold outreach.
Never.
Never. And of the tiny, tiny fraction who do, like only 2% actually book a meeting.
Which is, it's basically a total collapse of the traditional business model.
Oh, absolutely.
The ground hasn't just shifted. It has completely opened up and swallowed the old playbook whole.
So today we are unpacking Chapter 1 of Brian Signorelli's book, Inbound Selling, specifically the chapter called I Was Never Supposed to Be in Sales.
Right.
You are about to learn how the internet completely flipped the power dynamic between buyers and sellers.
And why mastering the inbound approach is critical now.
Yeah, exactly. Where you basically align with how people naturally want to buy. It's the ultimate survival skill for anyone interested in business, entrepreneurship, or, just growth in general.
It really is a survival skill. I mean, we are observing a fundamental rewiring of human purchasing behavior here.
Okay, let's unpack this.
Okay.
Because to understand the magnitude of this, we really have to look at the historical baseline. Right?
Exactly. For the better part of a century, the salesperson was the ultimate information gatekeeper.
The gatekeeper.
Yeah, like if we drop back to the 1980s or 90s, the seller held an absolute monopoly on data.
Oh, for sure.
If a buyer wanted to understand a product's features or its pricing structure, or how it compared to a rival product, they were basically held hostage to the sales process.
Because they had no choice.
Right, they had to pick up the phone, call a representative, and sit through a pitch.
Yeah, because there was literally no alternative mechanism for discovery. I mean, you couldn't just casually browse a company's internal pricing matrix on a dial-up connection.
No, definitely not.
You were flying completely blind until a representative decided to hand you a glossy brochure.
The asymmetry of information was entirely weighted in favor of the seller.
Totally.
The seller controlled the narrative, the pace of the information flow, and ultimately, the timeline of the transaction.
But then, the internet happened.
The democratization of information.
Driven first by search engines and then social connectivity. And it just shatters that monopoly.
Completely shatters it. Buyers now have limitless, essentially perfect information right at their fingertips.
Like, if you are curious about a vendor's implementation flaws, you don't ask their sales rep.
Of course not. They wouldn't tell you anyway.
Right. You go to third-party review platforms like G2 Crowd or TrustRadius.
Or you search peer networks on LinkedIn.
Or read subreddits dedicated to software stacks.
Exactly. The buyer has formed a comprehensive thesis about your value proposition long before you ever log their name in your CRM.
It's honestly like trying to date in the modern era.
Oh, that's a good comparison.
You don't just accept a blind date anymore and wait to see what the person is like over dinner.
No, you do the research.
You look up their Instagram, you check their LinkedIn, you ask mutual friends about them. You basically do a complete background check before you ever agree to get coffee.
You do. And modern buyers are doing that exact same background check on businesses.
Yeah.
Just like we use TiVo to skip commercials or satellite radio to avoid ads, buyers use modern technology as a shield. They're building a fortress around their attention.
Fortress. I like that.
The architecture of that fortress is fascinating. Buyers actively deploy digital shield to bypass traditional outreach.
Like caller ID.
Right, caller ID to block unknown numbers, spam filters to kill cold emails, ad blockers to silence the noise.
Because they don't want to be interrupted.
Exactly. The self-led autonomous research experience is simply superior to being pitched. The power dynamic has swung violently back to the buyer.
Okay, but wait. I have to push back on this a bit, though.
Sure, go ahead.
If we look at the data right, if buyers are doing 60% of the research themselves, and by 2020, Forrester predicted that up to 80% of the decision happens without a rep involved.
Right.
Doesn't that make the salesperson total obsolete? I mean, if I'm a founder, shouldn't I just fire my sales team and put all that money into making my website a better self-serve encyclopedia?
Well, that is the most common and perhaps the most dangerous assumption founders make when they see this data.
It feels intuitive, though.
It does. It feels intuitive that if the buyer has the information, the person delivering the information is redundant. But we have to look deeper into the psychology of complex problem solving.
Okay, how so?
The text references a massive piece of research from the Challenger sale, which studied thousands of B2B transactions.
Right, a huge study.
And they found that once a representative finally gets into the room, over 50% of the buyer's ultimate decision is driven not by what is being sold, but by how the rep sells.
Wait, really? The how outweighs the actual product?
It does.
That seems so counterintuitive. If I'm buying a $500,000 software package, I care about the features and the ROI, not how charming the rep is.
But it has nothing to do with charm.
It doesn't.
No, it has to do with cognitive overload.
Yeah.
The buyer has read the spec sheets. They've seen the pricing tiers.
Yeah.
They are basically drowning in a tsunami of data.
Oh, I see.
What they lack is diagnostic clarity.
Yeah.
Think about the medical field.
Okay.
You can go on WebMD right now and read 10,000 pages about your symptoms. You have all the information in the world.
Right, and usually convince yourself you have a terrible disease.
Exactly. Because when you are sitting in your house, terrified, trying to figure out if you have a common cold or something rare, that information is useless without context.
Because you're not an expert.
Right. You need a doctor to synthesize your specific symptoms against their clinical experience, look at your unique biology, and prescribe a treatment.
Oh, wow. Okay, that clarifies it.
It's the synthesis that matters.
So the old school rep was basically just reading me the WebMD page out loud, which I can do myself. But the modern seller is the doctor who tells me which part of the page actually matters for my specific condition.
Precisely. The modern professional must transform from an information gatekeeper into a trusted consultant who contextualizes data.
That makes so much sense.
The buyer might understand your software's features, But they don't know how those features integrate with their legacy systems.
Or how to navigate the internal politics of getting their CFO to approve the budget.
Exactly. So if you are listening to this and you interface with clients, you must operate under the assumption that they have already thoroughly researched you and your competitors.
Assume they know the basics.
Yes. Do not insult their intelligence by reciting baseline facts. Your job is to add diagnostic value, synthesize their research, identify their blind spots, and help them see around corners they couldn't possibly see on their own.
That is a massive paradigm shift.
Huge.
But what happens when companies refuse to accept that? Because I see it all the time.
Oh, they definitely do.
A company's revenue dips, they panic, and instead of adapting to this empowered buyer, they just double down on the old playbook. They scream louder.
They do, and it never works.
Which brings us to one of the most painful, visceral parts of Signorelli's backstory, the total illusion of activity.
It is a phenomenal case study in what economists call the sunk cost fallacy.
Mixed with a fundamental misunderstanding of unit economics.
Yes, exactly.
Let's set the stage here because the context is so crucial.
Okay, let's do it.
The author starts out his career as a research analyst at the Corporate Executive Board, or CEB.
Right.
He's a highly analytical guy doing the deep intellectual work, but he's watching the sales reps drive nice cars and make all the commission.
The classic dilemma.
So he thinks, I'm the one generating the insights. Why am I not capturing the financial upside?
He wants that financial freedom.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So he takes this massive, terrifying leap. He takes a $30,000 pay cut, which brings his bank account down to literally $100.
$100.
It's $100. And he does this in exchange for a 20% equity stake in a brand new startup called Gifts on Time.
Which, mathematically speaking, is a massive risk profile.
Huge.
He traded liquid capital for illiquid equity in a totally unproven business model.
A completely unproven model.
Yeah.
And the business model was a platform designed to automate corporate gift giving.
Right.
Think attorneys, accountants, real estate agents sending gifts to clients. He's brought on to run sales and marketing, but he has absolutely zero operational experience in either field.
Zero.
So, lacking a modern framework, he defaults to the loudest, most interruptive tactics imaginable.
The old brute force outbound.
Exactly. He buys massive email lists. He hires a PR agency for $7,000 a month to try and manufacture buzz.
$7,000 a month for a startup with no revenue.
I know. And he's literally picking up the phone and cold calling executives at Tiffany's, Godiva, and Brookstone.
We really need to dissect why this is such a disastrous approach in the modern era.
Please do.
He was treating volume and financial expenditure as a substitute for a cohesive acquisition strategy.
Because he didn't know what else to do.
Right. When an organization doesn't understand the mechanisms of modern buyer intent, their instinct is simply to cast a wider, more expensive net.
Like buying email lists.
But buying an email list is fundamentally flawed. It relies on interrupting people who have demonstrated zero intent to solve the problem you address.
They don't care about your product.
Exactly. You are paying a premium to acquire contact data and then burning brand equity by annoying the recipients.
And when the email lists and the expensive PR firm fail to generate revenue, they don't pause and rethink the strategy.
No, they double down.
They double down even harder, which leads to this incredible story about the trade show trap.
The trade show.
They decide they need face-to-face interactions, so they go all in. They spend over $100,000 to exhibit at the Legal Marketing Association conference down in Orlando.
$100,000.
And they drag a literal 400-pound physical booth across the country.
Just conceptualize the unit economics of that decision for a second.
It's wild.
They are a cash-strapped startup. They allocate a massive six-figure sum to secure physical real estate in a convention center.
Plus all the other costs.
Right. They pay for flights, hotel accommodations, per diems, and the logistical nightmare of shipping a 400-pound structure.
And they stand there for 3 days. Their feet are covered in blisters. They pitch their corporate gifting platform to literally everyone who walks past the booth.
Everyone.
They talk until their voices are completely gone. And on the final night, they go back to their hotel room. They pour some drinks. They sit down. And they dump a massive pile of 300 collected business cards onto the table.
300 cards.
And the author looks at this pile of cardboard and literally says out loud, so this is what $1 million looks like.
They genuinely believe they had struck gold.
They really did. But what was the actual financial return on that $100,000 investment?
Zero.
Absolute zero.
Not a single sale.
Not one sale materialized from those 300 business cards. It is gut-wrenching to even think about.
Is the perfect illustration of why we call it the illusion of activity.
It feels like work.
It does. But we have to analyze the structural reasons why trade shows so often function as a trap for uninitiated businesses.
Okay, break that down.
It comes down to intent and audience composition. First, consider the psychology of the attendee. For a significant portion of corporate employees, a trade show is essentially a sanctioned vacation.
A vacation?
Yes. They're there to escape the daily grind of the office, attend a few keynotes, drink at the networking mixers, and collect free merchandise.
They want the free pens.
Exactly. Their psychological state is oriented toward leisure and generalized learning, not urgent purchasing.
That makes total sense. When I go to a conference, my guard is actually higher when I walk the expo floor because I know every person in a booth is going to aggressively pitch me. I actively avoid eye contact.
Most people do. Furthermore, consider the demographic of the floor traffic. The people wandering the aisles collecting pens and scanning badges are very rarely the economic buyers.
They aren't the decision makers.
Right. They might be end users or mid-level influencers.
Right.
But the person with the authority to sign a six-figure software contract is usually in private meeting rooms or VIP sessions.
Oh, that is so true.
They're not aimlessly walking the floor waiting to be pitched by a startup they've never heard of.
So trade shows are basically useless?
Not entirely. Trade shows are highly effective for established enterprise companies focusing on brand retention and meeting existing clients. But they are incredibly hostile environments for startups trying to generate net new transactional revenue.
So gifts and time fell victim to a massive false positive.
Absolutely.
Standing on your feet for 72 hours feels like hard work. Collecting 300 business cards triggers a massive dopamine hit in the brain. It simulates the feeling of momentum.
But it is a dangerous psychological trap. A business card is the ultimate vanity metric.
It means nothing.
It possesses zero intrinsic economic value. The critical takeaway for anyone evaluating their own business operations is to ruthlessly audit your activities.
Right.
Are you confusing the exertion of energy with the generation of revenue? Are you looking at vanity metrics like a stack of cards, a high open rate on a cold email blast, a spike in social media impressions from a PR stunt, and tricking yourself into believing that equals a qualified sales pipeline?
Because it doesn't.
It doesn't. Because if you are spending precious capital to interrupt people in environments where they have no buying intent, you're just accelerating your own demise.
Okay, so if screaming louder at trade shows literally bankrupts you, what is the alternative? How do you actually get a buyer's attention when they've built this massive digital fortress around themselves?
Well, this is where the story gets really compelling.
Because the failure of the trade show forces the author into a massive philosophical crisis, and he ends up experiencing two radically different approaches to a business conversation.
The contrast he observes here provides the foundational blueprint for modern consulting.
Okay, let's start with the old way. He looks back at his time as an analyst at CEB, and he remembers shadowing a veteran, highly successful sales rep.
The old school closers.
Right, the quintessential old school closer. And the author listens in as this rep opens a phone call with a prospect. His opening line, and this is a direct quote from the text, is, "Tell me, Mr. Prospect, what you know about corporate executive board."
Oof. If you dissect the underlying psychology of that question, it is breathtakingly arrogant.
Honestly, if someone asks me that on a first call, my immediate internal reaction is incredibly defensive.
Naturally.
I'm thinking, who is this guy to quiz me? I don't work for you. Why are you making me prove my knowledge of your company? It sounds like a teacher scolding a student who didn't do the reading.
It is a dominance play.
Totally.
That methodology is the absolute epitome of seller-centric behavior. It operates on the flawed assumption that the seller's organization is the focal point of the universe, and it forces the buyer to jump through a conversational hoop to prove they are worthy of the seller's time.
Which is just crazy today.
Right, it relies on a historical power imbalance that, as we discussed, simply does not exist anymore. It immediately creates adversarial friction.
Yeah.
Now let's contrast that with the lifeline the author encountered when his startup was hemorrhaging cash.
Right. So Gifts and Time is dying. They are running out of runway. A consultant advises them to look into this relatively unknown software company called HubSpot to help fix their broken marketing engine.
A pivotal moment.
The author gets on a call with two HubSpot representatives, John Marcus and Mike Redboard. And the architecture of this call is the complete inverse of the CEB interrogator.
The most striking element of the HubSpot call is the total absence of a pitch.
No pitch at all.
None. If we analyze the transcript of that conversation, the HubSpot reps do not open by talking about their proprietary software features.
No.
They don't quiz the author on his knowledge of their brand. Instead, they deploy highly calibrated, deeply diagnostic Socratic questioning.
Yeah, John Marcus asks questions like, how do you make money?
Such a powerful question.
And when the author admits that the business model is struggling and they are burning cash, John doesn't immediately jump in with a solution. He asks, why you think that is?
He creates space for the buyer to think.
He just creates space. And then he asks the pivotal question, what about your website? Do you generate any leads through your site?
Notice the deliberate framing and the pronoun usage there.
Oh, yeah.
How do you make money? Why do you think your marketing isn't working?
It's all about them.
Exactly. The entire spotlight is placed firmly on the buyer's operational reality.
It's a you-focused conversation.
Yes. By utilizing this sequence of precise questions, the rep isn't telling the author what is wrong. He is guiding the author to discover the brutal truth for himself.
Which is so much more effective.
It is. Through this guided realization, the author recognizes that his website, which he probably spent a small fortune developing, is nothing more than a static digital brochure.
It has zero mechanisms for capturing interest or generating pipeline.
Nothing.
But I can hear people listening to this and being a little skeptical, though.
Really? Why?
Well, if a sales rep I barely know asks me, how do you make money? I might still get my guard up. Isn't that just a different flavor of arrogance?
How so?
Like, isn't it a bit intrusive to play amateur therapist with a stranger's business model?
That is a highly astute challenge.
Right.
The difference lies in the intention and the permission structure of the conversation.
Okay.
The arrogant CEB rep demanded information to validate his own ego. The consultative rep asks invasive questions to genuinely diagnose the root cause of a symptom.
That makes sense.
If you go to a cardiologist and they ask you about your diet, your stress levels, and your family history of heart disease, you don't consider it arrogant.
No, I want them to ask that.
Exactly. You consider it necessary for an accurate diagnosis.
Right.
The consultative shift requires the seller to position themselves as a specialist who needs a deep operational understanding of the business before they can responsibly recommend a structural change.
I see. So it's about earning the right to prescribe. They were diagnosing the illness, which was an unsustainable customer acquisition cost, before they offered the medicine.
Exactly. By diagnosing the problem deeply and empathetically, they establish profound trust.
So what's the practical application of this?
The practical application here is a concept we often refer to as the Fight Club rule of modern business development.
Ah, I love this.
The first rule of selling is you do not talk about your product.
That is brilliant. The first rule of selling is you do not talk about your product.
You do not.
You center the entire early dialogue around their business model, their unit economics, their fears. You have to definitively prove that you understand their operational reality before you ever ask them to enter yours.
And that profound shift in conversational dynamics is what convinced the author to adopt their methodology.
Which leads us directly into the mechanical execution of this philosophy.
Yes.
How do you actually operationalize being helpful? Because this is the core of the inbound awakening.
It is the strategic transition from value extraction to value creation.
Yes. So Gifts and Time takes their absolute last remaining dollars and invests in this inbound software platform.
Their last bit of runway.
And the execution of this strategy sounds almost ridiculously simple compared to dragging a 400-pound booth to Orlando.
It really does.
They completely stopped buying cold email lists. Instead, they sat down and wrote a few highly targeted educational blog posts about the intricacies of the corporate gifting industry.
Educational being the key word.
Then they added a simple call to action, a CTA, to the footer of their website. It was just a button that said, download the ultimate guide to client gift giving.
A very clear offer.
And they gated that specific PDF guide behind a landing page that required a visitor to enter their email address to access it.
And we must examine the immediate empirical results of that pivot.
It blew my mind when I read it. On day one, the very first day this system went live, they generated 40 brand new, highly qualified leads.
40 leads.
40. They spent $100,000 in Florida for 0 sales, and then they write an article, put up a PDF, and get 40 leads in 24 hours. It's staggering. People who were never on any purchase list willingly typed their contact information into a form. But I want to pause here because this is where a lot of business advice gets hand-wavy.
What do you mean?
How did 40 strangers magically find a brand new blog post on the internet in one day?
Ah, that is the crucial mechanical question.
Right.
It wasn't magic and it wasn't luck. It was the exploitation of search intent and SEO algorithms.
Okay, walk me through that.
While the founders of Gifts on Time were exhausted and sleeping, hundreds of executive assistants, office managers, and law firm partners across the country were actively experiencing a problem.
They needed to buy gifts.
Right. They were opening Google and typing in long-tail search queries like best corporate gifts for accountants or how to automate client holiday gifts.
Ah, so they were intercepting existing momentum.
Precisely. Google's algorithm is fundamentally a massive matching engine designed to pair human intent with the most relevant digital asset.
Yeah.
Because Gifts and Time stopped creating promotional brochures and started creating highly specific educational content that directly answered those specific queries, the algorithm rewarded them with organic visibility.
They intercepted the buyer right when they were looking for an answer.
Exactly.
Ah.
They intercepted the buyer at what Google calls the zero moment of truth, the exact second the buyer is actively seeking a solution.
And the psychology of that interaction is fascinating. Why did those 40 strangers willingly hand over their email addresses? Because in the digital age, your inbox is sacred. You don't just give your email to anyone.
No, you don't. They willingly surrendered their contact information because Gifts and Time engaged in a frictionless value exchange.
A value exchange,
They leveraged the psychological principle of reciprocity.
which means
The startup offered immense tangible value upfront. They provided an ultimate guide that educated the buyer, answered their pressing questions, and solved a micro problem for them, entirely free of charge. By providing that value first, they earned the trust and the permission to request the buyer's contact data in return.
it's the total inverse of the cold call.
It really is.
A cold call asks for your most precious resources, your time and your money, before giving you anything in return.
Value extraction.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But the inbound approach gives you education, it gives you actionable value, and in return, the buyer gladly reciprocates with their attention and their trust.
If you are analyzing your own digital infrastructure right now, apply this exact lens.
Yeah.
When a prospect lands on your website or views your LinkedIn profile, what is the fundamental nature of your relationship? Are you immediately demanding things?
Right. Are you just screaming, contact us, book a demo, or buy now?
Or are you offering them a piece of frictionless value? Are you providing a diagnostic template, an industry benchmark report, a free consultation?
Something useful.
You must consistently solve a small problem for your prospect before you earn the right to solve their macro business problem.
That is a phenomenal gut check for any leadership team. Are you demanding or are you providing?
It's a critical question.
But here is the tragic irony of the author's story. Even though the inbound methodology worked perfectly, it generated the exact type of qualified leads they were desperate for, the intervention came too late.
Far too late.
The patient was already terminal. They had burned through too much of their runway on the expensive PR retainers and the disastrous trade shows. The startup ultimately ran out of cash and collapsed.
It is an incredibly common trajectory in the startup ecosystem.
Is it?
Oh, absolutely. The initial misallocation of capital creates a deficit that even a brilliant strategic pivot cannot overcome.
They just dug the hole too deep.
Right. However, the true value of this chapter isn't the failure of the business. It is how the author processed that failure.
Yeah, that's the best part.
It leads us to the final and perhaps most vital concept: the courage to pivot, and the realization that modern sales requires rigorous intellectual capacity.
It's a very vulnerable part of the book. The author has to face the music. He realizes the business model is fundamentally broken. He reaches out to his former boss from his CEB days, a woman named Sampriti, to ask for guidance.
And her response is a masterclass in leadership.
It really is.
Yeah.
She doesn't coddle him. She asks him this incredibly piercing, tough question.
What does she ask?
She says, if you're not in for another year the way your business partners are, is it fair to just commit partway?
That is profound emotional intelligence.
Right.
She didn't tell him what to do.
Hmm.
She utilized the exact same consultative, diagnostic questioning we discussed earlier to force him to confront his own internal dissonance.
It hit him like a ton of bricks. He knew his heart wasn't in corporate gifting anymore. He was suffering from the sunk cost fallacy of his own career.
He had to leave.
He had to leave. But the incredible part is that he didn't become cynical. He didn't decide that startups were a scam or that marketing was useless.
Which a lot of people do.
They do. But he had the clarity to separate the failure of the specific business model from the undeniable success of the inbound philosophy.
He knew the methodology worked.
So he leans all the way in. He decides to apply for a sales position at HubSpot, the exact company that had diagnosed his business earlier.
And this application process becomes the crucible that permanently alters his perception of the entire sales profession.
Exactly, because we have to remember, this guy is a former research analyst. He used to view sales as this dirty, thankless, sleazy profession reserved for loudmouths who couldn't do complex math.
The old stereotype.
He hated the idea of cold calling and annoying people, but the HubSpot interview process completely shatters that stereotype.
It wasn't just a basic interview.
It wasn't just a manager asking, hey, can you talk fast and push a product? The rigor was staggering.
Tell them about the process.
He went through multiple intense phone screens with senior executives. He was required to take a highly complex 2-hour SAT-style analytical exam.
A SAT-style exam for sales.
Yeah, and he had to perform a heavily scrutinized mock role play where he had to diagnose a hypothetical business problem.
We need to contextualize why an organization would implement an SAT-style analytical exam for a sales role.
Because that sounds crazy to most people.
It does, but it speaks to the fundamental evolution of the required skill set. If your job is simply to recite a brochure and aggressively push for a close, you don't need analytical rigor. You just need a thick skin and persistence.
Just dial for dollars.
Right. But if your job, as we've established, is to synthesize complex market data, understand the nuanced unit economics of a prospect's business, and deploy sophisticated diagnostic questioning, then high-level cognitive processing is a mandatory prerequisite.
It elevates the role from a vendor to a true consultant. Experiencing an interview process that rigorous proved to him that modern sales isn't about trickery or having a dominant personality.
No, not at all.
It is a highly analytical, deeply empathetic, and entirely respectable career path. It requires sharp intelligence and deep emotional intuition.
It is the ultimate professional pivot. He transitions from a mindset of, I was never supposed to be in sales, to the profound realization that modern inbound selling is actually the purest form of business consulting and problem solving.
It really is.
For anyone listening, whether you are building a revenue team or navigating your own career trajectory, the practical application is to demand both rigorous analysis and deep empathy in your operations.
Absolutely.
And crucially, if you find yourself in a venture where your heart isn't fully committed, if you cannot match the intensity of your partners, you must cultivate the courage to step away.
Have the courage to pivot.
But you must extract the hard-won intellectual lessons, like the mechanics of inbound value creation, and carry them forward into your next chapter.
That is the perfect synthesis of his journey. Failure in one specific application was the exact catalyst he needed to discover the underlying mechanics of how modern business actually works.
Exactly.
Okay, let's take a breath and pull all of these threads together into a single, cohesive framework.
Let's do it.
If there's a soul to this chapter, the realization that hits you right between the eyes, it is that the internet did not kill the salesperson. It just violently eradicated the lazy salesperson.
The lazy salesperson is gone.
It killed the information gatekeeper. We are operating in an ecosystem where the buyer holds absolute power. They have access to infinite data, they deploy impenetrable digital shields, and they can completely block out any interruption they deem irrelevant.
The dynamic is totally flipped.
Success today depends entirely on your willingness to stop pushing your own agenda. You have to stop acting like the hero of the story and start pulling people toward you by offering genuine, frictionless education, insatiable curiosity, and profound consultative value.
And if we extrapolate that foundational truth into the future, we rise at a fascinating inflection point.
Oh, where are you going with this?
Think about the technological trajectory. If we are already operating in a reality where a buyer can independently locate 80% of what they need online without ever speaking to a human, what happens when artificial intelligence matures?
Oh, wow.
What happens when AI agents can instantly synthesize all of that complex market research, compare pricing matrices, and read peer reviews in milliseconds?
They won't need us for data at all.
Right. The machines will possess all the analytical data, but the singular element an algorithm cannot replicate is the genuine, nuanced human empathy required to sit across from a terrified founder, diagnose a complex, highly emotional business problem, and guide them through the change management required to fix it.
Wow. In an age of artificial intelligence, profound human empathy actually becomes your ultimate defensible competitive advantage. That is an incredible thought to end on.
It really changes how you look at the future of business.
It does. Now that we understand exactly why the entire philosophy of selling and marketing had to change, the massive operational question becomes, how do we actually find and identify the exact right people who are actively looking for our help without wasting our capital and our time?
The great question.
We'll leave you to chew on the mechanics of that until our next deep dive. What if everything you thought you knew about selling is exactly what's stopping you from closing deals today?
Oh, man. That is, I mean, that's a genuinely unsettling premise.
It really is.
Because you spend an entire career building this very specific set of reflexes. You know, handling objections, pushing for the close, always controlling the narrative.
Right, the classic playbook.
Exactly. Only to realize that those exact reflexes are the things actively driving your buyers away right now.
Yeah, and that is exactly the core tension we are looking at today on this deep dive for our YouTube audience.
It's a big one.
For the longest time, the archetype of the quote-unquote great salesperson has been incredibly monolithic. Like, we all picture that aggressive, fast-talking...
They'll always be closing guy.
Yes, the always be closing road warrior from the 1990s,
Yeah.
the person with the heavy briefcase, the slick counter-arguments, you know, the
Right.
Rolodex full of captive targets.
The sheer force of will to sell ice to an Eskimo.
Exactly. And we idolize that figure in business culture for decades.
Well, we idolized it because for a really specific period in history, that brute force methodology actually worked. It was effective. But the environment that allowed that predator-style salesperson to thrive, it's completely evaporated.
Which brings us to the entire mission of this deep dive. That traditional aggressive salesperson is fundamentally dead.
Yeah.
Or, well, more accurately, their effectiveness had just flatlined entirely. They were essentially killed by the internet, and they've been replaced by something far more formidable.
But complex, yeah.
Right, the modern empowered buyer.
Yeah.
So if you are tuning in today, whether you're an entrepreneur trying to bootstrap your first startup, or maybe a sales manager trying to fix a leaky pipeline.
Or just someone fascinated by human psychology.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Adapting to this shift isn't just some theoretical exercise. It is a matter of absolute professional survival.
And survival in this new landscape, it requires a complete dismantling of how we think about go-to-market strategies. Our source material for this analysis maps out this fundamental transition perfectly. We are moving away from the era of traditional, interruptive sales tactics and moving toward a framework called inbound selling.
So let's lay out the roadmap for the next hour or so. We are going to completely deconstruct this undeniable shift in buyer psychology, looking at the mechanical and emotional reasons why buyers block us out.
The blocking is so real today.
Oh, completely. Then we're going to isolate the core DNA, like the specific, unfakeable attributes of the modern successful sales rep.
And we'll look at why a 10-year resume of closing deals might actually disqualify someone from this new role, which is wild to think about.
It's totally counterintuitive. And finally, we'll lay out the fundamental framework of inbound selling step by step. The ultimate goal here is to give you a shortcut to building undeniable trust, scaling your revenue, and just aligning how you sell with how human beings in the 21st century actually want to buy.
You know, the central theme we'll keep returning to today is this concept of friction.
Okay, friction.
Yeah, traditional sales introduces massive friction into the buyer's life. Inbound selling, on the other hand, removes that friction. It acts as a natural extension of the research the buyer is already doing.
Right.
Because you just cannot force a buyer through a rigid, quota-driven sales process anymore. You have to structurally support them through their own organic buying process.
And to understand that structural support, we really have to start with the foundational shift in the power dynamic.
Right.
Because the entire concept of inbound selling rests on understanding who we are selling to and how drastically their access to information has changed the game. Let's rewind the clock for a second.
Let's do it.
Before the internet really matured, the seller essentially held a total monopoly on data. If I was a buyer in, say, 1995, looking to purchase enterprise software,
Good luck.
right, or industrial machinery, or even just a fleet of vehicles for my company, I was operating completely in the dark.
You were totally dependent on the vendor. The information asymmetry back then was staggering. Just think about the physical reality of that era.
It's hard to even imagine now.
It is. The product specifications, the pricing tiers, the implementation timelines, the list of referenceable customers, all of that lived in a physical binder on the sales rep's desk. or just in their head.
So, as a buyer, my only option to get educated was to actually invite the sales rep into my office, give them an hour of my precious time, and subject myself to their pitch.
Exactly. They were the absolute gatekeepers of the information you needed to do your job.
And because they were the gatekeepers, they controlled the entire cadence of the relationship.
Oh, 100%. They could withhold pricing until you agreed to a second meeting.
Oh, I remember that.
Right. Or they could refuse to show you a demo until you brought your VP into the room. They dictated all the terms of engagement because the buyer had literally no alternative source of truth.
The buyer was fundamentally disenfranchised.
Yeah, that's exactly the word for it.
But that monopoly has been violently dismantled. Today, the buyer's journey looks entirely different, and the source material emphasizes just how hyper-educated these prospects have actually become.
It's night and day.
Buyers are doing deep, exhaustive homework completely in the shadows before they ever even think about filling out a Contact Us form. They are using Google to pull up your product specs.
Yep.
They are on LinkedIn investigating the tenure and background of your executive team.
We're doing opposition research on you.
Seriously. They are reading through third-party review sites, places like G2 Crowd, Trust Radius, or Capterra.
And that's the killer right there.
Yeah, because they don't just know your polished marketing claims anymore. They know your competitors' claims, and they know your product's specific weaknesses based on unfiltered, verified reviews from people in their exact industry.
And the psychological ramification of this is profound. It's not merely that buyers have the ability to find this information independently.
Right.
It's that they possess an intense, almost visceral preference for this self-led, solitary research phase.
They want to be left alone.
Exactly. They want to remain anonymous for as long as humanly possible. They do not want to be managed by a sales rep, and they definitely do not want to be interrupted.
Well, the aversion to interruption is pretty universal now. We see this in our personal lives every single day. The sources use this great analogy of the pivo to describe how consumers started skipping television commercials.
The classic TiVo.
Yeah, but we can update that to look at the entire modern digital ecosystem. I mean, we pay premium subscription fees specifically to remove ads from our streaming services.
We install ad blockers on our browsers just to scrub banners from websites.
Right. We use caller ID and sophisticated spam filters on our phones to silence unknown numbers automatically. We actively submit our names to do not call registries.
We have basically constructed a fortress of technological and psychological filters around our attention.
That's a great way to put it, a fortress.
Because attention is our most scarce resource, and we guard it ruthlessly.
And yet, traditional sales, the cold call, the unsolicited mass email, the random LinkedIn pitch, it all operates under the delusion that those filters just don't apply to them.
Right. A traditional seller views themselves as the exception to the rule, like, oh, my pitch is so good, they'll want to hear it.
But to the buyer, that outreach is the ultimate, universally despised interruption.
And the statistics cited in the research, they illustrate the total collapse of this interruptive model. The Corporate Executive Board, or CEB, they conducted massive studies showing that over 60% of the B2B purchasing decision is completed before the buyer ever engages with a supplier.
60%, that's huge.
It gets crazier. Forrester took it further, predicting that up to 80% of the buying cycle would happen without any direct intervention from a sales rep.
Wow. And the response rates on the outbound side are just abysmal. Forbes reported that over 90% of C-level executives never, ever respond to cold emails or cold calls.
90%.
And only 2% of cold outreach ever converts into an initial meeting. Just think about the massive waste of human capital there.
It's staggering.
You have thousands of reps sending millions of emails just to yield a 2% meeting rate while simultaneously annoying the other 98% of their total addressable market.
It is literally a mathematically doomed strategy. I mean, if a buyer has already completed 60 to 80% of their research, they have already framed their problem.
Right.
They've already identified potential solutions, and they've already formed opinions about the market landscape. So if your sales rep is operating from an old-school script, treating the buyer like a blank slate who needs to be educated from step one,
Oh, that's the worst.
the cognitive dissonance is just jarring. The buyer is at step 8, and your rep is treating them like they are at step 1. It feels completely patronizing to the buyer, and it basically guarantees the deal will stall.
Okay, let me push back on this, though, because this data paints a very specific, almost fatalistic picture of the sales profession.
Sure.
If the buyer is doing 80% of the work without us, if they are researching, comparing, reading the brutal reviews, watching the YouTube tutorials, then what is the actual point of a sales team?
That's the billion-dollar question.
Right. It sounds like the modern sales rep is just being reduced to a glorified cashier. You just stand behind the digital register, wait for the highly educated buyer to walk up, and ring up the purchase.
Yeah.
If I'm a CEO looking at my payroll, these stats make me think I should fire my entire sales team, pour all that money into a bulletproof website, create some great demo videos, and just put a massive buy now button on the homepage. I mean, is the profession of B2B sales actually dying?
I love that you asked that because that is the logical extreme many executives jumped to when this data first emerged.
It makes sense on paper.
It does. They assumed the internet would automate complex sales the exact same way it automated buying a pair of shoes on Amazon. But the reality is far more nuanced, and the data from the Challenger sale methodology provides the critical counterweight here.
Okay, what did they find?
Their research revealed that once a sales rep does enter the conversation, even if it's way late, in the final 20% of the journey, more than 50% of the buyer's ultimate loyalty and purchase decision is driven by the sales experience itself.
Wait, really? 50%?
Yes. It is driven by how the rep sells, not what the rep is selling.
That 50% metric completely reweights the value of a company. Think about the implications of that for a second.
It's massive.
It means a company with a mediocre product but a brilliant consultative sales team will objectively beat a company with a superior product but a terrible interruptive sales team.
Without question.
Yeah.
And that's because we have reached an era of extreme commoditization. Your product features, commoditized.
Yep.
Your pricing models,
Yep.
easily replicated by competitors. Your slick marketing copy.
That's just
Table
a little
stakes now.
So what's left?
What is not commoditized and what cannot be easily replicated is the intellectual insight, the customized consultation, and the deep trust that a highly skilled professional provides during that final critical phase of the decision.
So the role isn't dying, but it is undergoing a radical transformation. The rep is no longer the information gatekeeper because the internet blew the gates open.
Correct. The role has evolved into what we can call a trusted consultant or a sense maker.
I like that. Sense maker.
Because think about the emotional state of a buyer who has just consumed 60% of their research online. They aren't starved for information.
No, they're probably overwhelmed.
Exactly. They are drowning in it. They have read 10 conflicting white papers. They have seen 3 different software tools that claim to do the exact same thing but use entirely different jargon.
And they have internal stakeholders arguing about the budget.
Right. They don't need a sales rep to read a brochure to them over a Zoom call. They need a human being to help them interpret how all that generic information applies to their highly specific, messy, and complex set of internal problems.
They need a translator. They need someone to look at the unique architecture of their business and say, okay, I see what you read online, but given your specific legacy systems and your team's skill level, here is how you should actually sequence this deployment.
Exactly. The value creation has shifted from providing data to providing clarity, and the statistics totally bear this out. The research notes that inside sales roles, where reps are using digital tools to consult and advise over the phone or video, is growing at 15 times the rate of traditional door-to-door outside sales.
15 times. That's insane.
It's a total paradigm shift.
So, synthesizing this for you listening, whether you are a founder trying to secure your first flagship enterprise client or a sales leader trying to hit ambitious quarterly targets, the practical, immediate takeaway here is that you must abandon the illusion of control.
You have to let it go.
You can no longer hoard information to force a meeting. You must flip your entire mindset from a push mentality to a pull mentality.
Nice.
You have to put incredibly valuable diagnostic content out into the world to help buyers during that silent 60% of their journey. And then you must position your sales team not as aggressive closers, but as elite consultants ready to add massive bespoke value the moment that empowered buyer actually raises their hand.
It is the shift from hunting targets to attracting active learners.
Which brings us to the second major pillar of our deep dive. If the battlefield has changed this dramatically, if the buyer is a hyper-educated, anti-interruption, self-guided force of nature who is drowning in data and seeking clarity, then the type of person you deploy to meet them must be fundamentally different.
Oh, completely different DNA.
Right. The old show up and throw up rep, the one who relies on charisma, a loud voice, and a rehearsed feature dump, is going to fail catastrophically in this ecosystem.
They will fail because they introduce friction rather than removing it. Look at it this way. If I am a buyer and I can read your entire feature list and pricing matrix on your website in 5 minutes, why on earth would I tolerate a 30-minute Zoom call where you just read those same features back to me?
You wouldn't. It's a waste of time.
Exactly. That rep adds zero net new value to the transaction. The modern inbound seller requires a completely different genetic makeup, a different professional DNA entirely.
Let's isolate the specific markers of that DNA then, because the sources are incredibly granular about what this looks like in practice. The first major differentiator is how they leverage technology.
Yes, this is huge.
A traditional rep views technology as a way to blast more people an automated dialer to make 100 cold calls an hour, or an email sequencing tool to spam 10,000 prospects. But the modern inbound rep uses technology for context, not volume.
Context is everything.
They use CRM data, website analytics, and social listening to identify who is actively showing intent and when it is appropriate to reach out.
Context is literally the currency of the inbound seller. Instead of buying a static list of 1,000 chief marketing officers and spamming them all on a Tuesday morning, the inbound rep is monitoring behavioral triggers.
Like what kind of triggers?
Well, they're looking at the back end of their HubSpot or Salesforce instance and noticing, the VP of Operations at Acme Corp just spent 12 minutes on our pricing page and then downloaded an ebook on supply chain bottlenecks.
Okay, that's a massive signal.
It is. That is a trigger event.
And that trigger event fundamentally changes the nature of the outreach.
Completely. The outreach is no longer a cold interruption. It is a warm, contextual intervention.
I love that phrase, contextual intervention.
Right. Because the rep can send a highly specific message referencing the supply chain bottlenecks, offering a specific piece of advice or an industry benchmark report. The technology is used to ensure absolute relevance.
And that leads to the second marker of this new DNA, which is the nature of the conversation itself. When the modern rep does connect, they don't launch into a product pitch. The sources emphasize that they hold business conversations.
Business conversations, yes.
They operate like peers, not vendors. They focus on the buyer's clear goals based on an ideal buyer profile, and they display a depth of industry knowledge that makes them instantly credible.
Because a vendor talks about what their software does. A peer talks about how the industry is shifting, how competitors are adapting, and what the financial implications are for the buyer's specific division. The modern rep has to possess enough business acumen to hold their own with a CEO or a VP.
And this leads to the third, and frankly, the most shocking characteristic of the modern inbound seller. The sources state that this rep is entirely comfortable discussing alternative solutions.
This one blows people's minds.
It's crazy. They are willing to openly recommend a competitor if it is objectively a better fit for the buyer's needs. Or they will advise the prospect to do absolutely nothing if the timing or the budget isn't right.
Yep.
Now, I have to stop here and argue from the perspective of the people actually in the trenches.
Go for it.
If you tell a frontline sales development rep or an account executive who is carrying a $1 million annual quota that they should willingly tell a buyer to go use a competitor, they will laugh you out of the room.
Oh, they'll think you're insane.
Exactly. To anyone who has a mortgage to pay, a manager breathing down their neck for pipeline updates, and a commission check tied directly to closed-won revenue, walking away from a deal sounds like professional suicide. If I have a buyer on the hook and they have budget, why on earth would I sabotage my own paycheck?
It is the ultimate paradox of inbound selling.
Yeah.
Right. And it causes massive, massive anxiety for traditional sales managers. But let's break down the actual economics of what happens when you don't walk away.
Okay.
Let's look at the life cycle of a bad fit deal.
Yep.
Suppose you are that stressed rep. You have a buyer who has budget, but deep down, you know your software doesn't quite handle the specific integration they need.
But you need to hit quota.
Exactly. You need to hit quota this month, so you gloss over the integration issue, you push hard, you offer a discount, and you close the deal. Boom. You get your commission check. What happens next?
While the implementation team takes over, and it's a complete disaster.
Precisely. The onboarding fails because the software doesn't do what was promised. The customer support team spends hundreds of hours trying to patch together workarounds, draining company resources.
And the buyer gets furious.
Furious because their own internal reputation is now damaged for buying the wrong tool. So in 6 months, they churn. they cancel the contract.
Because you lose the revenue anyway.
But it doesn't stop there. The blast radius of that bad deal is catastrophic in the modern era. That angry buyer goes on to G2 Crowd and writes a scathing one-star review detailing exactly how your sales team lied to them.
Oh, yeah. People read those.
They go to a major industry conference and tell 3 other peers who were in your pipeline never to do business with you. The revenue you gained in month 1 is entirely wiped out by the churn, the resource drain, and the reputational damage that prevents future sales.
So forcing a bad fit deal just to hit a short-term quota is actually severely value destructive to the company in the long run.
It is totally toxic. Now, invert the scenario. You are the inbound rep.
Yeah.
You uncover the integration issue during the discovery phase.
Yeah.
You look the buyer in the eye and say, based on how your legacy systems are built, our platform is going to cause you major headaches. We aren't the right fit. However, our biggest competitor actually specializes in that specific integration. I highly recommend you look at them.
Wow.
What happens to the buyer's psychology in that very moment?
Well, the skepticism vanishes entirely. I mean, you have just proven that you prioritize their success over your own immediate financial gain. You've essentially proven that you can't be bought.
You build extreme, unshakable trust. You transform instantly from a vendor into a trusted advisor, and the long-term ROI of that interaction is massive.
How so?
Well, that buyer will inevitably move to a different company in 2 years,
Yeah.
right? And when they do, who is the first person they call when they need new software? You. When they are at that industry conference and someone asks for a recommendation, who do they champion? You. The modern rep understands that managing a pipeline isn't just about closing deals today. It's about cultivating an ecosystem of trust that generates passive revenue for years.
This requires an incredible amount of emotional maturity, which naturally brings us to the hiring process. How do we actually find these people?
It's hard.
It must be, because the sources make a fascinating claim. When hiring for this new model, past sales experience does not predict future success. In fact, a 10-year resume of aggressive boiler room closing tactics might actually be a severe liability.
It is often a massive liability. An old-school rep has muscle memory built around manipulation, withholding information, and forcing artificial urgency.
And untraining that is tough.
Untraining those toxic habits takes way longer than just training a blank slate. That is why the authors highlight frameworks focused entirely on intrinsic attributes rather than, resume bullet point. They bring up Peter Caputa, a former VP of sales at HubSpot, who developed a 4-question framework to evaluate potential inbound reps. These questions are purely psychological.
Let's dissect these 4 questions because they are incredibly revealing.
Okay, the first question is, do they have the desire to be successful no matter what?
Which seems basic, right?
It sounds basic, but this isn't about asking, do you want to make money? Everyone says yes to that. This is about probing for deep intrinsic motivation. Will this person grind through the inevitable rejection and complexity of a modern sales cycle, or will they fold when things get ambiguous?
That makes sense. The second question, do they have a positive outlook on the product? This one is crucial because buyers today have a highly tuned radar for authenticity.
Oh, it can smell a fake a mile away.
Exactly. If you put a rep on the phone who doesn't fundamentally believe that your product makes people's lives better, the buyer will sense that lack of conviction in their micro-expressions, in the tone of their voice, in their hesitation during tough questions. You just cannot fake belief in the age of the hyper-educated buyer.
You really can't. The third question, do they have a positive outlook on themselves?
Interesting.
This evaluates resilience. Inbound selling requires asking difficult, probing questions to senior executives. If a rep lacks internal confidence, they will crumble under the intellectual pressure of a CEO pushing back. They need the self-assurance to hold their ground and guide the conversation.
And the fourth question, which might actually be the most important, will they take responsibility for all outcomes without making excuses?
The ultimate test.
We all know the stereotype of the traditional rep who misses quota and blames literally everything else. The leads are weak, the marketing team gave me bad lists, the product is missing features, the economy is bad.
Right.
But the inbound rep owns the outcome. If the leads are weak, they figure out how to source their own.
Exactly. The sources also weave in Mark Roberge's traits from the sales acceleration formula, which complement Caputa's questions perfectly.
Yeah, Roberge is legendary for this.
He famously hired not based on Rolodexes, but on traits like high emotional intelligence, or EQ. He looked for the grinder or hustler instinct.
Like the kid who ran the lemonade stand.
Exactly. Or the college student who worked 3 jobs just to pay for tuition. Someone with an innate drive that just cannot be taught in a classroom.
He also prioritizes strong problem-solving skills, intense coachability, and a genuine joy for learning. I want to zero in on two of those right now, EQ and coachability. Why are these two traits elevated above everything else?
It's a great question. Let's start with EQ.
Okay.
In a complex B2B sale, you aren't just selling a tool. You are navigating a maze of human emotion.
That's very true.
A high EQ rep can put themselves in the buyer's shoes. They can sense the unspoken political landmines the buyer is trying to avoid internally. They recognize the fear the buyer has of making a decision that might actually cost them their job.
Whereas an old school rep just pushes a feature benefit script regardless of the buyer's emotional state.
Exactly. A high EQ rep dynamically adapts their tone, their pacing, and their entire argument to the actual human being sitting across the table.
And coachability is the ultimate survival trait in the modern era, right? Because the buying landscape is changing at a breakneck pace.
Oh, it's so fast.
Artificial intelligence is altering how buyers research, new competitors launch overnight, communication channels shift from email to social to video. If a rep is stubbornly attached to the way they have always done it, they will be obsolete in 12 months.
Without a doubt. And during an interview, you don't test coachability by asking, hey, are you coachable?
Because everyone will say yes.
Right. You test it through action. You have the candidate do a mock presentation. Then you give them pointed, difficult feedback. You say, your pacing was too fast and you talked about features instead of asking about my business. Do it again and incorporate that feedback.
That role-play feedback loop is brilliant because you see exactly how they react. Do they get defensive and try to justify their first attempt? Or do they absorb the critique, adjust in real time, and execute the new strategy?
You need a sponge, not a rock.
Right. So the actionable takeaway here for you listening. If you are building a sales team, or if you are an entrepreneur acting as your own head of sales, you must audit your hiring criteria. Stop obsessing over whether someone sold software for Oracle for 5 years.
That doesn't matter.
Evaluate them on their emotional capacity, their problem-solving agility, and their empathy. In a world increasingly dominated by automated outreach and AI-generated emails, genuine human empathy is the ultimate unautomatable differentiator.
Which naturally leads us to the execution phase. We have established a shift in the market. We have identified the genetic makeup of the rep who can survive in this market. Now we need to look at what happens when this empathetic, highly coachable, gritty inbound rep actually gets the hyper-educated buyer on a Zoom call.
What exactly do they say? Or more importantly, what do they not say? This brings us to what the source material brilliantly refers to as the Fight Club rule of inbound selling.
I love this rule.
So good. But before we reveal the rule itself, we really need to understand the pain it was designed to cure. The author of the source material shares a very revealing personal anecdote about being on the buying side of the table.
Yeah, his experience as an executive.
Right. As an executive, he would agree to take meetings with sales reps, hoping to get some valuable consultation. Instead, he absolutely hated the experience. The reps would get on the phone and only ask surface-level, generic questions. They never dug for what he calls the meaning behind the meaning.
Let's actually illustrate what a surface-level question looks like versus a diagnostic question.
Let's do it.
Imagine a buyer says, our primary goal this year is to grow our revenue by 20%.
Okay.
A traditional rep hears that and immediately thinks, great, a buying signal. So they reply, awesome. Our software has an automated pipeline management feature that has helped companies just like yours grow revenue by 25%. Let me show you how it works.
They just jump right in.
They take a surface-level statement and immediately pivot into a pitch.
They accept the symptom as the disease. But the modern inbound rep hears that same statement, we want to grow revenue by 20%, and they pause. They ask, why 20%? Is that an arbitrary number, or is it tied to a specific board mandate?
Exactly.
And then the buyer might say, well, if we don't hit 20%, we won't have the valuation we need to secure our Series B funding.
But the rep digs deeper. And what happens to your division if you don't secure the Series B?
The buyer admits, if we don't get the funding, we will have to lay off 30% of the engineering team.
Boom. Now, the rep isn't selling a pipeline tool to hit a random 20% goal. The rep is consulting with an executive on how to save the jobs of their engineering team.
That is the meaning behind the meaning.
And the reason traditional reps never got to that level of depth is because they operated under a false, self-imposed urgency. Their behavior wasn't dictated by what the buyer needed. It was dictated by the fact that it was the 28th of the month and they needed 3 more deals to hit their quota.
Oh, end-of-month behavior is the worst.
It is. This internal pressure caused them to rush through qualification using outdated frameworks like BANT.
Let's define BANT for those unfamiliar with the acronym because it really represents the pinnacle of extractive sales behavior. It stands for budget, authority, need, and timeline.
Right.
In the old days, a rep was taught to interrogate a prospect in the first 5 minutes of a call to see if they were even worth talking to. Do you have the budget for this? Are you the ultimate decision maker? What is your immediate need? Are you buying in the next 30 days?
Just drilling them.
Exactly.
Yeah.
If the prospect answered no to any of those, the rep would aggressively push them off the phone. It was an entirely self-serving interrogation designed to protect the rep's time while offering absolutely zero value to the buyer.
None.
It created this lingering, toxic expectation in the market that all salespeople are just predators looking for a wallet.
It was a purely extractive process. The inbound methodology flips this completely. The core definition provided in the sources is that inbound selling is any form of selling designed to earn a prospect's trust.
Earn it.
Yes. Earning trust requires a deposit of value before withdrawal of information. Which brings us to the Fight Club rule.
Okay, here we go. The first rule of Fight Club is you do not talk about Fight Club. The first rule of inbound selling is you do not talk about your company, your product, or your service until you absolutely must.
It is a radical, almost terrifying departure from traditional sales, where the elevator pitch is the very first weapon deployed.
I want to speak directly to the anxiety this rule causes, though, because if I am listening to this for the first time, my alarm bells are ringing loudly.
Oh, for sure.
If I finally secure a 30-minute meeting with a key decision maker, and I am forbidden from talking about my product, aren't I just giving away free consulting? At some point, the business has to make money. If I don't tell them what my software does, how will they ever know to buy it? Am I just supposed to be a free therapist for their business problems?
It is the exact fear every rep faces when transitioning to this model. But let's look at the psychology of why the Fight Club rule is so undeniably effective.
Okay, let's break it down.
By aggressively refusing to pitch, you force the entire conversation to remain strictly anchored in the buyer's context. You are demonstrating through your restraint that you are genuinely interested in diagnosing their world rather than imposing yours.
You prove your expertise not by listing the features of your product, but by the devastating sharpness of the questions you ask about their business.
Exactly.
Now let's replace the cliché sales metaphors here. Think of this like a structural engineer inspecting a house compared to an aggressive house painter.
I love this analogy.
A homeowner notices a crack in their living room wall. They call a painter. The painter walks in, barely looks at the crack, and immediately opens his brochure. I have this amazing premium acrylic paint. It covers cracks beautifully, it resists fading, and I can give you a 20% discount if you sign today.
The painter's just pitching his product.
Right. Now, the homeowner calls a structural engineer. The engineer walks in and doesn't say a word about what they sell. They look at the crack. They ask when it appeared. They ask if the doors have been sticking lately. They ask to go down into the basement.
They're diagnosing.
Exactly. In the basement, they find a massive water leak eroding the foundation. The engineer turns to the homeowner and says, "The crack in your wall is just a symptom. If you paint over it, your house is going to sink 3 inches next winter and your roof will collapse."
And who does the homeowner trust with their money? The painter who pitched a $500 cosmetic fix, or the engineer who took the time to diagnose a $50,000 foundational crisis?
The engineer every time.
The Fight Club rule forces you to be the structural engineer. You must give value before you have earned the right to get value. Giving value means asking the diagnostic questions that uncover the foundation leak the buyer didn't even know they had.
Right.
Getting value is asking for their budget, pushing for a signed contract, or closing the sale.
You give before you get.
Yeah.
And addressing the fear of giving away free consulting. The goal of the diagnostic phase is not to be a charity.
Not at all.
The goal is to uncover the deep-seated foundational issues so thoroughly and so accurately that when you finally do break the Fight Club rule and introduce your product, it doesn't sound like a pitch at all.
It's the logical next step.
Right. It sounds like the natural, custom-tailored, inevitable prescription to the exact disease you just spent 30 minutes diagnosing together. Because we uncovered X, Y, and Z issues in your foundation, here is the specific architectural bracket we manufacture to fix it. The pitch just becomes a mere formality.
So the practical, immediate homework for for you listening is to audit your own sales motions. Record your next 3 sales calls. Set a timer. How many minutes into the call do you start talking about yourself, your company's history, or your product features?
Oh, that's a great exercise.
If it happens in the first 5 minutes, you are violating the Fight Club rule. You are treating the buyer's unique business as a generic nail for your specific hammer.
You are interrupting their buying process with your sales process. Okay, so we have established the necessary mindset. We need radical empathy. We need to hire highly coachable problem solvers. We need to act like structural engineers and obey the Fight Club rule.
Check, check, and check.
But empathy and a great mindset do not scale a business. You can have a team of the most empathetic, wonderful reps in the world, but if everyone is just winging their diagnostic conversations based on their mood, you have operational chaos.
You can't forecast that.
Exactly. You cannot forecast revenue based on good vibes. To match this new buyer behavior at scale, we need a rigorous, repeatable process.
And the data on process is actually staggering. Nearly half of all sales teams operate without a documented, standardized sales process.
Half. That's wild.
But the teams that do implement a documented methodology are 33% more likely to be high performers, and they consistently boast win rates of over 50%. Empathy without process is just a nice conversation. Process combined with empathy is a revenue engine.
The source material lays out the inbound sales methodology, which is a 4-part operational framework specifically designed to support the prospect through their buyer's journey.
Yeah.
But before we hit the 4 steps, we need to quickly define the buyer's journey, which consists of 3 distinct psychological phases: awareness, consideration, and decision.
Let's use the house analogy again. In the awareness stage, the buyer realizes they have a symptom, a crack in the wall, but they haven't diagnosed the problem yet.
Okay.
In the consideration stage, they have defined the problem, a cracked foundation, and are researching different types of solutions, like concrete pouring versus steel brackets. And in the decision stage, they have chosen a solution type and are now evaluating specific vendors.
Makes total sense. The inbound sales methodology provides 4 specific sequential actions the seller must take to align perfectly with those 3 buyer phases. The 4 steps are identify, connect, explore, and advise. Let's dedicate some serious time to each of these because this is the operational meat of the entire inbound philosophy. We will walk through the daily workflow of a modern rep executing this framework. So, step 1. Identify. This is the process of turning strangers into leads.
To understand the power of the identify stage, just look at the historical failure it replaces. In the old model, identifying prospects meant buying a massive unfiltered list of 5,000 names from a data broker and having your SDRs cold call them alphabetically.
You treated every stranger as an equal target.
Exactly. In the inbound model, the identify stage is about focusing your limited time and energy exclusively on active buyers who have entered the awareness stage of their journey.
Meaning they have emitted some sort of digital signal that they are experiencing a pain point. They have raised their hand, even if it's just a subtle twitch.
Yes. The daily workflow of an inbound rep in the identify stage involves acting like a digital detective. They use tools to monitor the ecosystem. Who is visiting the company pricing page multiple times this week? Who just downloaded the massive white paper on Q3 compliance regulations?
Who is asking highly specific questions about software integrations in a niche LinkedIn group?
Exactly. The rep prioritizes these active buyers over passive cold targets. You are identifying the people who are already trying to solve a problem you can fix.
It's the difference between standing on a street corner shouting at everyone who walks by versus walking into a hardware store and looking for the person staring confusedly at the plumbing aisle. You identify the active need.
Great analogy.
Once you have identified an active buyer, you move to step 2, connect. This is about turning those leads into qualified leads.
This is the critical first interaction, and this is where most reps fail because they totally forget the Fight Club rule. The goal of the connect stage is not to pitch the product.
Right.
The goal is to engage the buyer in a brief contextual conversation to see if the problem they are researching matches the solutions you provide.
So practically, what does that script actually look like?
Well, instead of a cold email saying, "Hi, I work at Acme Corp. We sell the best supply chain software. Do you have 15 minutes on Tuesday?" Which is entirely self-serving. The contextual outreach looks like this.
Okay, let's hear it.
"Hi, Sarah. I saw you recently downloaded our guide on international shipping bottlenecks." Typically, when VPs of operations download that specific guide, they are struggling with customs delays in European ports. Is that a challenge your team is currently facing, or were you just researching for a future project?
Oh, that's good.
That outreach is brilliant because it leads with context, it proves you're paying attention, and it offers the buyer an easy out.
You're not demanding a meeting.
No. You are simply trying to determine if their current problem aligns with your expertise. If Sarah says, yes, European customs are killing our margins, boom, she becomes a qualified lead.
Yeah.
You have permission to proceed. If she says, no, just doing research for a class I'm taking, you politely move on and save yourself hours of wasted time.
Which brings us to the centerpiece of the methodology, step 3, explore. Turning qualified leads into opportunities. This is where the structural engineer goes down into the basement.
The explore stage is the deep, diagnostic, consultative conversation. This is where you replace the old, extractive BANT interrogation with a framework designed to uncover the meaning behind the meaning.
So what are we looking for here?
During the explore phase, the rep is guiding a conversation to uncover 4 things: the buyer's deep-seated goals, the plans they have to achieve those goals, the challenges standing in the way of those plans, and the timeline they are working against.
Let's do a quick role play of how this sounds in practice, because the transition from connect to explore is where the magic really happens.
Let's do it.
Okay, so Sarah, the VP of Operations, agrees to a call because of the European customs issue. A bad explore phase sounds like this. So Sarah, how much budget do you have to fix this customs issue? And who else needs to sign off on the software purchase?
Ugh, that's just a BANT interrogation. It provides Sarah with 0 value.
Exactly. A masterful explore phase sounds more like this.
Sarah, you mentioned European customs are slowing down your shipping. What is the overarching goal for the operations division this year? And how much is this specific delay threatening that goal?
See, that's powerful. And Sarah might answer. Our goal is to reduce shipping times by 2 days to compete with Amazon. Right now, customs delays are adding 4 days.
And then the rep explores further. What plans have you already tried to implement to fix this? Have you tried switching freight forwarders?
You are diagnosing the root cause. You want to understand not just what they want to achieve, but why they want to achieve it and what happens to them personally and professionally if they fail. You are mapping the exact dimensions of the problem.
And once you have fully explored and mapped the entire foundation of the house, and only then do you earn the right to move to step 4. Advise, turning opportunities into customers.
The advise stage is where you finally break the Fight Club rule and introduce your product.
But because you have done such rigorous work in the explore stage, your presentation is radically different from a standard sales pitch.
It is hyper-tailored. You aren't opening a generic slide deck and reading bullet points. You are reflecting their exact reality back to them.
Precisely.
You say, Sarah, based on our conversation, your goal is to cut 2 days off your shipping time, but your current freight forwarders are getting stuck in European customs, which is threatening your ability to compete with Amazon. Because of those specific challenges, I am going to show you only the 2 features of our platform that automate European customs documentation. We are going to skip the rest of the demo because it isn't relevant to your current crisis.
That is the power of the methodology right there. You have transformed the product presentation from a vendor pitch into a customized executive briefing. The buyer feels heard, understood, and respected.
But it requires immense discipline to follow these 4 steps sequentially. The temptation for every sales rep is to skip the messy, complex explore phase, where you have to think critically and diagnose problems, and rush straight to the advise phase, where you can just comfortably read your rehearsed script.
Oh, the temptation is huge.
But if you are rushing to advise, you are acting like the house painter trying to paint over a cracked foundation. You might get a few uneducated buyers to fall for it in the short term, but you are losing the complex, high-value deals, and you are actively alienating your market.
The data proves that the discipline of adhering to identify, connect, explore, and advise yields exponentially higher win rates and radically reduces customer churn.
Let's pull the camera back a bit and tie all these incredible paradigm-shifting concepts together into a single, cohesive thesis.
That's good.
We started by confronting an uncomfortable truth. The traditional, interruptive, aggressive salesperson has been rendered entirely obsolete by the internet and the hyper-educated, empowered buyer. The monopoly on information has been broken.
Permanently broken.
We then looked at the genetic makeup required to survive this new era. The modern rep isn't a loudmouth closer. They are an empathetic, highly coachable problem solver who leverages context and is actually willing to walk away from a bad deal to protect their integrity.
And protect the buyer.
Right. We explored the anxiety-inducing but brilliantly effective Fight Club rule, demanding that we give diagnostic value before we ever attempt to extract financial value.
That's just key.
And finally, we walked through the operational engine that scales this mindset, the four-part methodology of identify, connect, explore, and advise.
If we synthesize the entirety of this deep dive into one core, unforgettable insight, it is this. Inbound selling is fundamentally an exercise in radical empathy, backed by rigorous methodology.
Radical empathy backed by rigorous methodology. I love that.
The internet gave buyers infinite choices, infinite reviews, and total unyielding control over their own research process. In a hyper-commoditized world where your product features, your marketing claims, and your pricing are completely transparent, the only remaining competitive advantage for any business is trust. Trust is the ultimate unhackable currency.
And trust cannot be forced. It must be earned through consultation. The modern seller doesn't win deals by being the loudest interrupter in the prospect's inbox or by having the slickest psychological closing tactic at the end of the month.
No, they don't.
They win by being the most helpful, clear-eyed structural engineer in the room. They win by proving unequivocally that they understand the buyer's problem better than the buyer does, and that they care far more about solving that deep-seated problem than they do about their own immediate commission check.
It is a complete inversion of the old predator-prey dynamic of sales.
Okay.
And ultimately, it is a vastly more fulfilling, intellectually stimulating way for professionals to actually build a career. You are no longer an adversary. You are a partner in their growth.
But of course, understanding this philosophy leaves us with a massive tactical cliffhanger. You know why you need to rethink your approach. You know the mindset required. You understand the 4 steps conceptually.
But the execution.
Exactly. Tomorrow morning, when you open your laptop, how do you actually execute step 1? How do you practically find these elusive, empowered buyers out in the wild digital ecosystem? How do you separate the active hand raisers from the passive noise?
That is the mechanical execution that separates theory from revenue.
And that is exactly what we are going to tear down in our next deep dive. Next time, we are going to unpack the exact step-by-step blueprint for the identify stage. We are going to reveal the specific digital triggers you need to be monitoring, and we will explain why trying to sell your product to everyone is mathematically the fastest way to sell to absolutely no one. You will not want to miss the mechanics of that breakdown.
It's going to be great.
For now, thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the source material. We strongly encourage you to take these frameworks, the Fight Club rule, the diagnostic mindset of the structural engineer, the 4-part methodology, and audit your own entrepreneurial journey this week. Listen to your own recorded calls. Look at the scripts your team is using, find the friction, and remove it. Until next time, keep exploring.
What if you never had to make a truly cold call again?
I mean, that sounds like the ultimate dream for most sales teams, right?
Right, exactly. Like, what if instead of just kicking down doors, you only walked through the ones that were already left slightly open for you?
That's a powerful way to look at it.
Because right now, for anyone listening who is in business, your ideal customer is probably 80% of the way toward making a purchase. And they haven't spoken to a single person at your company.
Not a single one. They're doing it entirely on their own.
Yeah, they've already diagnosed their own problem. They crowdsourced opinions from peers on social media. They read the reviews, and they quietly narrow down their options. So if your sales team is just picking up the phone to introduce themselves today, they aren't just late to the party. They are, well, they're kicking down the door of the completely wrong house.
Oh, absolutely.
So today, in this deep dive, we are breaking down the exact science of finding the door that was already left slightly open. We're looking at Brian Signorelli's framework on how to identify the right people and businesses to pursue.
And this fundamentally changes the entire psychological posture of a business. I mean, we are looking at a complete inversion of how companies traditionally think about growth.
Because the traditional way is just exhausting them.
See, it's brutal. Instead of manufacturing demand through sheer volume, just vocal dominance, we're talking about uncovering the demand that actually already exists, but it's just hiding in plain sight.
That is the core tension we're unpacking today. The modern buyer is completely empowered. Yet you look at the landscape, and a shocking number of sellers are still operating out of like a 1995 playbook.
Yeah, pounding the pavement.
Exactly. Blasting out thousands of generic emails, dialing random numbers from purchase lists, and just praying for a fraction of a percent in conversion. It burns out teams. And frankly, it really annoys the market.
The friction there comes from a fundamental misunderstanding of timing. I mean, you cannot force a buyer to care about a solution if they haven't yet realized they have a problem.
Right.
The old model was all about interrupting people to educate them. The new model, the inbound method, is about observation and alignment.
So for everyone listening, whether you're an entrepreneur scaling your first offering, a sales director overhauling your strategy, or just someone fascinated by the psychology of modern commerce, you are going to walk away from this conversation with a totally different lens.
A completely new blueprint.
Yes, we're going to dissect how to define your exact ideal buyer, how to read their digital body language, and how to know the precise moment they actually want to hear from you.
And that means we have to shift from a seller-centric worldview to a buyer-centric worldview. To do that, we have to start by understanding the earliest phase of the buyer's journey, which is the awareness stage.
Let's dive into that, because awareness is it's one of those corporate buzzwords that gets thrown around in marketing meetings constantly, but we need to anchor it in reality. What is the actual biological moment a buyer enters the awareness stage?
Well, it's the exact moment a symptom becomes painful enough to demand attention.
Okay, give me an example.
Sure. Imagine a director of IT at a mid-sized logistics company. It's a Tuesday at 2:00 p.m., and the main server crashes for the third time this month. It completely halts warehouse operations.
Oh, wow, so full panic mode.
Exactly. Now, the IT director isn't thinking about buying new cloud infrastructure yet. They aren't thinking about vendors. They're just thinking, I cannot keep fixing this specific server issue. My team is wasting hours, and the COO is furious with me.
Right, they haven't named the solution. They've only named the symptom.
Precisely. That realization, that tangible recurring pain point, that is the entrance to the awareness stage.
So what do they do next? Because they don't just call a software vendor out of the blue.
No, of course not. They open a browser, they start searching for things like how to stabilize legacy servers during high volume, they read a blog post, maybe they download a white paper about IT infrastructure scalability.
Or they ask a question in a private Slack channel.
Yes, a community of other IT professionals. And by doing all of this, they are leaving a digital footprint.
They're taking action.
Yeah, and that action separates them from the rest of the market. They've transitioned from a latent cold prospect who's just going about their day into an active buyer.
An active buyer, that's the key term.
Right. And the entire philosophy of inbound selling hinges on the ability to detect those specific digital clues. A website visit, a downloaded ebook, registering for a webinar, opening a specific email.
So see, this is where I see companies get things horribly wrong. I've consulted for organizations where the marketing team, they literally throw a party because they got 5,000 people to download a generic top industry trends PDF.
Oh, I've seen that so many times.
Right. And then they throw those 5,000 names over the fence to the sales team. The sales team calls them, and absolutely nobody wants to buy anything.
Because they're not active buyers for your solution.
Exactly. And then the sales team complains that marketing's leads are garbage, and marketing complains that the sales team is lazy.
You've just described the classic misalignment trap perfectly, and it's actually backed up by some really fascinating research from the Corporate Executive Board, or the CEB.
Oh, right, the CEB data. What did they find?
They found that the #1 reason sales and marketing teams fail to generate momentum, it isn't a lack of budget. And it isn't a bad product. It's that they do not share a unified vision of their customer.
They're aiming at completely different targets.
Exactly. Marketing is casting this massive generalized net just to hit engagement metrics like those 5,000 downloads. And sales is trying to force those random unqualified catches into a highly specific purchasing funnel.
It's the danger of trying to be everything to everyone. The messaging just gets so diluted that it resonates with absolutely no one. I mean, the IT director whose server just crashed, they don't care about a top industry trends PDF.
Not at all.
They care about server stability, period.
Which is why we have to abandon the old metaphors for selling. Outbound selling is always compared to a numbers game. It's like being a bank robber who just kicks down the door of every single building on the street, hoping one of them happens to have a vault full of cash.
That sounds exhausting. And highly illegal.
Right. Well, in the business sense, it's noisy, it's high risk, and most of the time you end up empty-handed. But inbound selling, when you do it right, is like being a forensic accountant.
A forensic accountant. I like that. Unpack that for me.
You've already read the ledger, you know exactly which building holds the vault, you know the vault is unlocked, and you even know what denomination the bills are in before you step out of your car.
That is a great analogy. But it requires an incredible amount of discipline up front. And let me challenge the core premise here for a second. Let's play devil's advocate.
Go for it.
If I'm running a company that has a really wide variety of products, or maybe I operate in a massive global market, isn't there an inherent danger in putting on the blinders? Like, if I focus entirely on finding that one specific IT director, aren't I leaving a massive amount of money on the table by ignoring 90% of my total addressable market?
Yeah, that is the most common fear executives have when they adopt this model, but it stems from confusing your macro business strategy with your micro campaign execution.
Okay, distinguish those for us.
Narrowing your focus for a campaign does not mean permanently abandoning the rest of your market. It just means sequencing your approach. You simply cannot craft a compelling message that speaks simultaneously to a Fortune 500 CEO, a mid-level IT manager, and a small business owner.
Because their psychological drivers are entirely different.
Entirely. The CEO cares about stock price and market share. The IT manager cares about not getting fired because the server went down on a Tuesday.
Right. And if your website copy tries to speak to both of them in the same paragraph.
It speaks to neither. It just sounds like corporate jargon. The discipline lies in choosing one specific active buyer type, building a highly targeted campaign for them, running it, learning from it, and then moving on to the next segment.
So focus is really the only way a message cuts through the noise of the modern internet.
It is the only way.
Okay, so if we accept that we must focus, which makes total sense, how do we actually draw the target? How do we define this person so clearly that a 22-year-old marketing coordinator and a 50-year-old senior sales executive have the exact same picture in their heads?
That requires mastering two tools that sound superficially similar, but they perform radically different functions: the buyer profile and the buyer persona.
Profile and persona, I feel like those get conflated constantly.
All the time. And the conflation of those two terms is where a lot of inbound strategy just falls completely apart.
Let's separate them then. So the buyer profile, that is the organizational shell, right? It's the company itself.
Yes. We are talking strictly about firmographics and demographics here.
Firmographics. So for the listener, that's basically the business equivalent of human demographics.
Exactly. You are looking at the company's size, their annual revenue, their geographic location, their industry vertical, and their technological environment.
Okay, so a clear buyer profile might be a B2B software company based in North America, employing between 25 and 200 people, generating between 5 and 20 million in revenue, and they use Salesforce as their CRM.
That is a perfect profile. It paints a very clear picture of the building we are targeting.
But as the saying goes, buildings don't sign contracts.
They do not.
Buildings don't have budgets, and buildings don't feel the anxiety of a crashed server. Humans do.
Which brings us to the buyer persona. If the profile is the physical address of the house, the persona is the psychological blueprint of the person actually living inside it.
So moving from profile to persona means moving from firmographics to psychographics.
Yes. You have to get inside their head.
And I know there's compelling data out there about how complex the modern B2B purchasing environment has become. I mean, we aren't just selling to one dictator at the top of a company anymore, are we?
Oh, far from it. The average B2B purchase now involves a buying committee of over 6 different people.
6 people. That's a lot of cooks in the kitchen.
It is. Think about the implications of that. The corporate landscape has become incredibly risk-averse. Hierarchies are flatter, and tech stacks are deeply integrated. No single person wants to make a unilateral decision that could break the company's workflow.
So within that single buyer profile, our 25 to 200 person software company, you're going to encounter multiple entirely distinct personas.
Exactly. Let's map that out. In that company, you might have the VP of sales. Now, their psychological profile is driven by top-line revenue growth, shortening the sales cycle, and hitting quarterly board targets.
Right. Big picture stuff.
But on the exact same buying committee, you have the sales enablement manager. Their profile is driven by rep adoption, the ease of training, and making sure the data going into the CRM is actually clean.
And then you probably have the CFO involved too.
Oh, always.
Yeah.
And the CFO's primary driver is cost containment and proving measurable ROI within 6 months.
So if a sales rep gets the CFO on the phone and starts pitching how, like, fun and easy the user interface is,
the deal is dead in the water.
Because the CFO doesn't care if it's fun, that's what the enablement manager cares about.
Exactly. You have to tailor the conversation to the specific human persona you're talking to.
Here is where the rubber meets the road, though. How on earth do we gather this deeply personal psychographic data without resorting to just Sitting in a conference room making wild, stereotypical guesses. Because I've seen companies build personas where they literally just guess what a VP of sales thinks about based on, like, movies they've seen.
Yeah, like Glengarry Glen Ross.
Right. Always be closing.
Guesswork is the absolute enemy of empathy. You have to conduct actual boots-on-the-ground research. The gold standard here, which Signorelli heavily champions in the book, is conducting one-on-one customer interviews.
Okay, but you don't just call them up and ask them what features they like.
No, you do not ask them about your product. You ask them about their life. You sit down with your most successful existing customers who fit the profile, and you ask them to tell you a story.
Give us an example. What's a question that actually elicits that psychographic gold?
You ask things like, take me back to the day you realized you needed a new solution. What exactly happened that morning? How's your personal performance measured by your boss? What is the one recurring problem that keeps you awake at 2 a.m.?
Wow, so you're really digging into the daily reality. What does your actual to-do list look like on a typical Tuesday?
Yes. You are looking for the emotional drivers behind the corporate mask.
I love that, the emotional drivers behind the corporate mask.
And beyond just the interviews, you mine your existing data. You look at your CRM and analyze the commonalities among your closed-won deals. You look at your website analytics.
How so?
Well, if a blog post titled, How to Reduce Rep Onboarding Time by 50% is getting massive sustained traction, you don't need to guess what your sales manager persona is stressed about. The behavioral data is screaming it at you.
That makes total sense. But capturing that data is really only half the battle, isn't it? Because a brilliant, psychologically rich persona does absolutely no good if it just lives in a PDF buried on the marketing director's hard drive.
Which is where it usually ends up.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So how does an organization actually use this day to day?
It has to be institutionalized. It must become the shared language of the entire company, not just the sales and marketing departments.
We're talking customer support, product development, account management, everyone.
Everyone. Think about the friction caused when a marketing team promises one thing to a specific persona. The sales team sells a slightly different vision, and then the onboarding team treats them like an entirely different person altogether.
It destroys trust instantly.
It does. So socializing the persona means building a document that includes real quotes pulled directly from those one-on-one interviews. It needs to clearly outline their goals, their daily challenges, and crucially, their most common objections.
Let's linger on the objections for a second, because knowing why someone will say no before you even dial the phone, that feels like a superpower for a sales rep.
It is a superpower. If your sales team knows that the CFO persona's top objection is always going to be integration downtime, the rep doesn't wait for the CFO to bring it up.
They bring it up first.
Exactly. They proactively address it in the first 5 minutes of the conversation. They say, I know a major concern for financial leaders in your position is the hidden cost of implementation downtime, so let me show you our parallel deployment model.
You immediately disarm the objection and build immense trust. You're proving you understand their world.
And it also fundamentally dictates the vocabulary you use.
Oh, the vernacular. There's a brilliant example in the material regarding selling into marketing agencies. Can you share that?
Yeah. So when dealing with agency owners, using the traditional word sales can actually trigger a negative defensive reaction.
Because it sounds too transactional.
Right. It sounds transactional to an industry that really prides itself on creativity and partnership. But when a sales team changed their vernacular and started using the phrase business development instead of sales, the entire dynamic shifted.
Just from changing one word.
One tiny semantic tweak. But it showed the buyer, we speak your internal language. We understand your culture.
Language is a proxy for belonging. When you adopt their internal vernacular, you bypass their defensive filters.
Beautifully put.
Now, a really common practice to make this stick across the company is naming and visualizing the persona, giving them a catchy alliterative name like Finance Manager Margie or IT Ian or Sample Sally, and actually taping a real-life photo of a customer to the wall.
Yes, that's a very standard inbound practice.
Okay, I have to play devil's advocate here again.
I'm ready.
Does bringing a picture of Landscaper Larry into a board meeting feel, I don't know, a little juvenile? Like, if I'm a hardened 20-year enterprise sales veteran, I might roll my eyes at Sample Sally. It feels a bit like a cartoon.
It's a totally valid critique, and you see that pushback in corporate environments all the time. Veterans hate it at first, but the mechanism behind why this is championed isn't about being cute. It's rooted in cognitive psychology and schema theory.
Okay, walk me through the psychology of it.
Human brains are not wired to process and emotionally connect with a spreadsheet of firmographic data. We are hardwired for facial recognition and narrative.
So it's a cognitive shortcut.
Exactly. It reduces cognitive load.
Right.
In a 1,000-person organization, you don't have 20 minutes in every single product sprint meeting to re-explain the nuances of a buyer's psychological profile, their budget constraints, and their technical limitations.
Right. Nobody has time for that.
But if an engineer asks, how will this new UI update affect IT Ian? Every single person in that room instantly downloads the entire mental schema of Ian.
They know Ian is overworked.
They know he hates flashy interfaces.
And he needs to see server status in 2 clicks, not 5.
Exactly. The name and the face act as a mental trigger that scales empathy instantly across a massive organization. It is a highly efficient communication protocol disguised as a quirky marketing tactic.
I really love that framing. It isn't a cartoon, it's an empathy protocol. That changes how I look at it completely.
It's very effective.
Okay, so we have this highly detailed persona. We know who they are, we know what they fear, we know the words they use. But how does that actually change what a sales rep does at 9:00 a.m. on a Tuesday?
Right. How do we operationalize it?
Exactly. How do they apply ITEN to a specific living, breathing lead in their pipeline without spending 3 hours stalking them on the internet?
This is where we transition into the tactical execution, the detective work. You have to analyze the specific digital footprint of the individual lead right before you reach out. And the rule here is very strict. This process should take 5 to 10 minutes, maximum.
5 to 10 minutes. Walk me through what a 5-minute investigative sprint actually looks like. Where does a rep even start?
Minute 1 starts inside your own ecosystem. You open your CRM. You look at the lead's history with your company. The first question is, are they acting alone, or is there a cluster of activity?
A cluster of activity, meaning multiple people from the same company.
Yes. If you see that the IT director, a systems administrator, and the COO have all visited your website in the last 48 hours, that tells you an internal conversation is already happening. The pain point has been recognized across the entire buying committee.
Oh, wow. That completely changes your opening line. You aren't just calling one guy in a silo. You're stepping into a live corporate initiative.
Exactly. You tailor your message to acknowledge that broader initiative. Now, minute 2 is analyzing their funnel positioning. How recent and frequent are their interactions?
Okay, so what are we looking for there?
Did they read one generic blog post about industry trends 6 months ago and then go silent? Or did they look at your pricing page, read a case study, and visit the integration specs page yesterday?
The psychology there is drastically different. I mean, the person reading the generic blog post is still in the early awareness stage. They need education, they need perspective.
Right.
If you call them and start quoting pricing tiers, you will scare them away.
Absolutely. But the person on the pricing page is in the decision stage. If you call them and offer to educate them on industry trends, you are insulting them and wasting their time. They want brass tacks.
Minute 3. What happens in minute 3?
Minute 3 is looking for micro-personas.
Micro-personas, what's that?
Let's say your core persona is Agency Aaron, right? A marketing agency owner. Within that broad category, there are nuanced subsets. If you look at their website and see they are a web development firm, you know their specific pain point is likely cash flow.
Because dev projects are heavily front-loaded and take months to complete.
Exactly. But if you see they are an SEO agency, their pain point is likely proving long-term ROI to impatient clients.
Same core persona, but entirely different daily anxieties.
Yes. So you tailor your opening statement to match the micro persona.
Okay, but what if they don't have a massive footprint in your CRM? What if they perfectly match the profile? They are the exact right company, but they haven't visited your site recently or at all.
Then minutes 4 and 5 are spent looking for trigger events out in the wild. You check LinkedIn, you check their company news page, you search their press releases.
Trigger events. These are the absolute holy grail of modern sales. Give us the breakdown on why they are so powerful.
A trigger event is an observable occurrence that creates an opening for a highly relevant conversation. It proves you aren't just making a cold call, you are responding to a shift in their world.
Like what? Give me some examples of strong trigger events.
Did the company just close a Series B funding round? That is a massive trigger.
Because it means they have a huge influx of capital.
Capital, yes, but more importantly, aggressive growth targets from impatient investors, and a mandate to scale operations immediately. They have money and they have pressure.
What else?
Did the company just announce a merger? Did the specific lead just get promoted to a new role?
Oh, a promotion is a great one. If someone just got promoted to VP of Sales, they are looking to make an impact in their first 90 days. They are inherently open to new systems that will make them look like a visionary to the CEO.
Exactly. Using a trigger event shifts your positioning from being an interrupter to being an advisor.
Let me play the skeptic again, though.
Bring it on.
5 to 10 minutes per lead? If a rep has a pipeline of 200 people spending 10 minutes researching every single one before making a move, it sounds like a recipe for a rep who spends all day reading LinkedIn and never actually picks up the phone. I mean, isn't volume still somewhat necessary?
It is a balance, definitely, but the data overwhelmingly supports the research-first approach. The goal isn't to write a biography on the prospect. You are looking for the Goldilocks amount of information.
Just enough, but not too much.
Just enough to construct a highly personalized, contextually relevant opening. And as reps practice this, their speed increases dramatically. They know exactly which tabs to open, which CRM fields to check, and how to spot a trigger event in 60 seconds flat.
And I guess the fundamental truth is that attempting to communicate with 10 highly researched, deeply understood prospects will yield vastly higher conversion rates and bigger deal sizes than blindly spamming 100 people with a generic script.
You are trading low probability volume for high probability precision.
Which naturally leads to the final, and perhaps most difficult, phase of this methodology. The mechanics of connection. You have the persona, you have the research, you found the trigger event. Now, how do you manage the persistence required to actually get a busy professional on the phone?
Because let's be honest, having a great trigger event doesn't mean they answer on the first ring.
Oh, almost never. So let's talk about organizing the day. A rep opens their laptop at 8:00 a.m. There are leads everywhere. How do they prioritize who gets that 5 minutes of research first?
You need a rigid prioritization matrix to prevent decision fatigue. The hierarchy has to be clear.
Okay, what's priority one?
Priority 1, inbound leads. These are the individuals who have explicitly raised their hand, they filled out a form, requested a demo, or asked a question in a chat box. They have expressed direct, immediate intent.
Makes sense. Strike while the iron is hot. Priority 2.
Priority 2 is fascinating, inbound companies.
Inbound companies. How does that differ from inbound leads?
These are organizations where you can see via IP tracking or website analytics that multiple people from their network are interacting with your content, but no one has officially filled out a form yet. They are researching you anonymously.
Oh, so you can see the building is interested, but the specific people haven't introduced themselves.
Exactly. So your job is to use your persona map, cross-reference it with LinkedIn, identify the most likely decision maker at that company, and reach out proactively.
Hey, I noticed your team has been exploring our architecture docs.
Exactly. You beat them to the punch. Then, priority 3 and 4 are your colder leads. People who perfectly match your buyer profile and persona, but haven't actually engaged with your brand yet. You work your way systematically from the warmest intent down to the coldest.
I know there's staggering data out there about how quickly sales reps give up. What is the actual breakdown of persistence in the industry right now?
It is the single biggest point of failure in the execution phase. The average sales rep gives up after 1 or 2 attempts to connect.
1 or 2. That's it.
That's it. If they send an email and leave a voicemail and hear nothing back, they categorize the lead as dead.
But the reality of buyer behavior is that 80% of successful sales are initiated after 5 or more attempts.
80%. So if you're stopping at 2, you are literally missing out on 80% of your potential revenue. The gap between seller behavior and buyer reality is just massive.
The mechanism behind this failure is usually the seller's fear of rejection. They feel like they are being annoying, but you have to view it through the buyer's lens. Buyers are not ignoring you because they harbor deep malice toward you.
They aren't sitting there plotting your downfall.
No, they are ignoring you because they are in back-to-back Zoom meetings from 9 to 5, their inbox has 300 unread messages, and they are fighting internal political fires. Your email just got pushed down the stack.
I always frame it this way. Persistence without research is just being a mosquito buzzing in someone's ear. It is highly annoying, and eventually they will swat you.
Right. Block the email, hang up the phone. Exactly. But persistence with deep research, where every single touchpoint adds value, is entirely different. If my first email references a trigger event, and my second touch is a LinkedIn message sharing an article highly relevant to their micro-persona, and my third touch is a voicemail offering a specific insight about their tech stack, I'm not a mosquito.
No, you're a resource.
I'm a dedicated consultant trying to deliver a cure.
That is the multi-channel approach in action. You cannot rely on a single medium. Email, phone, social media, video messages. You surround the prospect with value. It triggers the mere exposure effect.
The mere exposure effect. Remind me how that works.
It's a psychological phenomenon where people tend to develop a preference for things merely because they are familiar with them. Even if they don't reply to the first 4 touches, they are seeing your name, they are seeing your company, and they are associating you with relevant, helpful insights. By the 5th touch, you are a familiar, trusted entity.
Wow, so you're building brand equity with every touch, even without a response.
Exactly.
Now, I know there is data out there from Insight Squared, I believe, about the golden windows for actually making these phone calls. When is the modern buyer actually receptive to picking up the phone?
The aggregate data points to specific windows. Statistically, the highest connection rates occur between 10 a.m. and 11 a.m. and between 4 p.m. and 5 p.m. local time. And the single best day of the week to get a live connect is Tuesday.
Okay, wait. Let's pause right there. Because if Tuesday at 10 a.m. is statistically the golden hour, human nature dictates that I should just cram absolutely all of my prospecting calls into that 1-hour window and spend the rest of the week doing administrative work or sending emails. Why isn't that the strategy?
Because aggregate data is dangerous if you apply it blindly to individual context.
Oh, that's a great point.
You cannot treat Tuesday at 10 a.m. like a magic bullet. Think about the variables. What if your specific persona, the IT director, always has their weekly departmental stand-up on Tuesday mornings?
Then you'll never reach them.
Right. What if they work in logistics and 4 p.m. is their most chaotic hour for dispatch?
The danger is getting paralyzed by over-optimizing the timing while sacrificing the consistency of the outreach.
Exactly. The channel you use, the persistence you apply, and the highly researched value of what you actually say are infinitely more important than the minute on the clock. Use the data as a guideline, not a law. You need to block out time every single day for prospecting.
So the real takeaway there is to build an unshakable cadence. Draft a sequence that includes calls, emails, and social touches, and make a contract with yourself that you will execute at least 5 value-driven attempts before you walk away from a high-fit prospect.
It demands discipline, but it is the only methodology that aligns with the reality of the modern buyer.
Let's pull the lens all the way back and synthesize this. This has been a massive deep dive. We have dismantled the old outbound model. We've explored the psychology of the awareness stage. We mapped the distinction between the company profile and the human persona.
We talked about reducing cognitive load by naming and socializing those personas across the organization.
IT Ian and Sample Sally. We walked through the 5-minute forensic detective work to find trigger events, and we established the undeniable math of multi-channel persistence.
And if we distill all of those mechanics into a single governing philosophy, it is this. Selling is no longer an act of vocal dominance. It is an act of empathetic detective work.
Empathetic detective work. I really, really love that. Because when you do the heavy lifting up front, when you rigorously define exactly who you are looking for, when you read their digital body language to understand their pain, and when you persistently offer value instead of just pitching, you fundamentally alter the dynamic.
You completely flip the script.
You shift from being an interrupter kicking down a door to an invited guest walking through a door they intentionally left open for you. You aren't forcing a human being down a rigid corporate funnel. You are simply acting as a guide on a path they are already desperately trying to walk.
In the modern economy, the loudest voice rarely wins anymore. The most helpful, contextually relevant resource wins the deal.
But of course, you have done the forensic research, you monitored the digital footprint, you found the trigger event, and you persistently dialed the phone. And finally, after 4 attempts, the IT director actually picks up and says hello.
That's the moment of truth.
What happens in those crucial first 10 seconds? Because if you say the wrong thing, your brilliant 10 minutes of detective work evaporates instantly. Next time, we're exploring the psychology of the connect phase and exactly how to earn the right to the rest of their afternoon. Keep exploring, keep researching, and we will see you on the next deep dive.
What you just listened was the beginning of a full audio, way longer, explaining every single chapter of the book. If you would like to keep listening to the end and access to the full audio, you can access it with the link down below in the description and in the pinned comment.